I'd like to call to order the May 7th at 6 PM meeting of the Policy Subcommittee of the Quincy School Committee. This is a meeting in the whole. Do we want?
Yes, the meeting of the whole.
Yes. Do we want to call attendance, or we
No,
have a quorum?
you
Can I
have a quorum
just
and you're good to
observe?
go.
We have a quorum. Okay. So we have two items on the agenda that we want to get through. First item is the proposed revised school committee policy review, 9.11 grading systems. I defer to Dr. Perkins and Mr. Morani. Should be.
Just tap it.
There we go.
Oh, hang on one second. Try that.
I was working. Here we go. All right. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Tonight, our focus, as Mr. Guttra just mentioned, is discussing some of the possible policy amendments, both when looking at attendance and grading. So more specifically, our attendance and grading policy was looked at by a proposal team. In other words, a group of people, which I'll mention momentarily, that really worked together to draft the language that we have for you tonight. So I want to share with you and acknowledge those members. And I also want to go over the current policy status. So just taking a look at what the current policy says and some of our reasoning as to why we wanted to take another look at it and propose some alternative language, some amendments to the existing policy as opportunities for enhancement, especially when you factor in things like chronic absenteeism. I believe when this policy was originated, chronic absenteeism as it's defined today didn't exist. And so there's certain things that have changed since the origin of this policy that, you know, it's our task of making sure that we're up to date. So we're going to share the current policy status with you. We're also going to talk to you about the proposed amendment language. So we'll break it down into just overall objectives and highlights, what we're hoping to get out of the language, so you know what the team's goals were when we were putting this language together. And then obviously we'll share with you that specific language, of course, our next steps. So if language were to be approved, the steps we would take to carry out the kind of the rollout of this new policy. And of course, we'll answer any questions and address any comments that you may have. So as I mentioned, this everything that Dr. Perkins and I are going to be presenting tonight is put together by a team. That team is comprised of those names there. So Gail Cavallo from the QEA, Michael Ellis from Quincy High School. So and I'll say their titles because we were intentional in terms of making sure we had various perspectives when we were discussing the development of the possible policy language. So again, Mr. Ellis, the ELA department chair over at Quincy High School, Principal Gilbert from North Quincy High School, myself, Dan Pacho, not his official title, but we'll just say Aspen Guru, the one who has to figure out how to make it work behind the scenes in Aspen. Of course, Dr. Perkins as the team lead, Bill Reardon, Guidance Department Chair over at Quincy High School, Marissa Smith, Dean over at North Quincy High School, and Chris Tierney, our data coordinator for the district. So we really wanted to make sure, of course, that both high schools were represented in this conversation, but that various positions were represented during this conversation. And really the idea there is looking at it from different perspectives, trying to anticipate if a change were to be made, what are some potential issues that might stem from said changes, and we need to anticipate that and either adjust the wording or come up with a particular measure to address it. So we were very intentional in making sure our team was well represented across the two schools, and I do just want to thank all of those members. They really put in a lot of time, a lot of thought, and everything we're going to be sharing with you is based on input from our discussions and our planning. Our objectives as a team, we wanted to discuss the strengths and weaknesses of the current policy language, so just taking a look at what's working, what isn't. Also anticipate, as I mentioned, potential issues associated with any changes that we were considering on proposing. And then, of course, developing the new language based on what our discussions brought us to in terms of what do we think is going to be most effective for students, their families, things of that nature. So just making sure that we could develop language that served those priorities as we carried out those discussions. So starting with attendance policy. So I'll just share with you, you should all have the language of the policy as a whole. However, I just wanted to pull out one core piece and just read that for each of you and for anybody who might be listening so that we kind of see the core of what we're focusing on here. So students are expected to be in class 100% of the time. Students who have 7 or more absences, in parentheses, not school approved or unexcused, from class or school during a marking period shall fail for that term with a grade of 62 or less if they have earned a lower grade. So it would be a 62 if let's say their earned grade was higher than a 62. If they were absent 7 times or more unexcused, it would be brought down to a 62, which is a failing grade currently. If they had, let's say, a 58 average, it would stay at a 58. So it's 62 or lower. And then on the 4th absent, the parent guardian shall be notified. So that's the language, again, not all of it, but a core part of it that is current today. So some of the concerns or let's say, opportunities to enhance that kind of popped out to us. 7 or more absences per quarter converts an earned grade to a failure of 62%. So that's the gist of it, right? So if a student misses 7 days unexcused, if it's excused, it's not applied towards the 7. It's important that we say that as many times as we can so families don't get worried if there's a real medical issue. We're not penalizing a student for a legitimate medical reason. We're doing it for those unexcused absences. That's what this policy would mandate us to do. So a couple of the issues that come from this. So it allows up to 24 absences per school year without academic consequences. In other words, if a student only misses 6 unexcused days within a quarter, and then that's over 4 quarters, they could miss 24 total school days unexcused and not have those academic consequences applied. Now, as I mentioned before, my assumption is this language originated before chronic absenteeism was defined as it is by the state, which puts us at 10% of the school year. In most cases, typical enrollment, that means 18 absences. So theoretically, under this current policy, a student could not have any academic consequences towards missing 6 days per quarter, 24 for the year, still be identified by the state as chronically absent, and yet there wouldn't be necessarily an academic consequence for that. Now, certainly, you have guidance teams, you have a lot of people working to support that attendance, but as far as how this applies to grading, it's certainly an important detail to make note of. So it's important to consider that as we develop new policy language, and we certainly have as we propose to you. It does not mention a school year maximum limit of unexcused absences. So in other words, it's only focused by quarter as opposed to in addition to a total amount for a year. So we tried to add in some language that addressed that. And then it also, as I mentioned, so it currently enables students to be identified as chronically absent without that academic consequence. So a student could have 19 absences, chronically absent, and yet academically there's no impact as a result of those absences. And I think just the gist of it is we need to look at everything we can to help promote attendance. We can all agree students cannot be educated if they are not in school. And so that's really the drive of what we're doing. How can we create, Dr. Perkins and I, along with so many SLT members, educators throughout the various schools, building principals, we've put together so many initiatives from a supportive lens in terms of helping our students attend, but we also have to hold people accountable when they're not, when it's unexcused. So it's finding that balance of supporting as much as possible, but also making sure that students are held accountable when they exceed what we deem as excessive, right? And we would use the chronically absent as kind of our definition for excessive. So just some highlights and objectives that we have in our proposed amendments before I hand it off to Dr. Perkins. So we wanted to create language that, as I mentioned, holds students accountable for the unexcused absences, emphasis on unexcused. We want to reduce chronic absenteeism. So another hope of this potential amendment would be to reduce chronic absenteeism and also minimize the amount of failing grades for those students who earn higher scores. Now, I didn't speak to that yet, so I'll clarify. If you look at highlights, so the first one is brought the threshold to 4 or more unexcused absences. So in other words, what we're going to be proposing, what Dr. Perkins is going to share in the language, is that we move down from 7, right? So currently it's 7 or more to 4 or more. So right off the bat, we want to bring that number down. So that way, if a student is absent 3 times, right, they don't get 4 or more, they're absent 3 per quarter. Now they're at 12 for the year. Not great. We certainly want to try and get that student to enter the school more and not miss 12 days, but now they're no longer chronically absent, and there's a little buffer before they would be identified as chronically absent. If they were to hit 4 days, now they have academic consequences, which I'll talk about momentarily, but if they were to hit 4 days of unexcused absences per quarter, that would eventually put them in violation of this policy, and that would be a total of 16. So even then, they're not yet chronically absent. Typical enrollment is 18 days is chronically absent, right? So the idea is that a student would be absent 16 times. They would have the academic consequences. They're not yet chronically absent. That's a measure to try and bring that chronic absenteeism number down. 18 is a very important number, and we want to try and get as many kids below 18 as possible. So another key point is shifting the emphasis from grades to credits. This is another big change. So not just moving from 7 down to 4, but shifting grades to credits. So in other words, currently, if let's say a student has a 70% and they're absent 7 times in a quarter, and it's unexcused, per the current policy, that student would go down from that 70 down to a 62, which is a failing score. That's what would happen. And now that student, theoretically, the rest of the year could be impacted by that score, right? Because now that's averaging in to the 4 quarters. What we're proposing, what Dr. Perkins will share in the language, is that we want to shift the emphasis away from the grades and to the actual credits. So we'll go over the specific language of what we mean when we say credits, but we want to try and shift we'll say the consequence for students who are missing excessive school days unexcused away from grades and focus on credits. And we'll explain that a little bit more momentarily. We want to incorporate yearly totals, as I mentioned, along with quarterly. We want to promote credit recovery options. Again, we'll speak to that momentarily. But again, the idea is if a student is losing credits, we also want to give that student an opportunity to earn them back. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. And we want to address students who miss individual courses. So during our team discussion, this was definitely a topic that came up, and a lot of educators shared with us a concern of you might have students who are not marked absent for the day because they arrived to school late. But if they also, if they're also dismissed, okay, so let's say if you take a student, they arrive at 9:30 a.m., so now they're tardy for school. And if they're dismissed at 1:30 p.m., now they've been dismissed, they're leaving school early. So they're not marked absent, but they're missing classes. And that's a problem when it happens on a repetitive basis. So what we wanted to do was create language that didn't just address the day-to-day school-wide absences or the school day absences, but the classroom absences. So if a student is missing, let's say, his or her math class excessively, this would also be brought into this language here. So that even if they're present in school, if they're missing particular courses excessively, then they could possibly lose some credits. Again, we'll go over the language momentarily when Dr. Perkins shares some of those details with you. And finally, we do want to incorporate other incentives for attending school. So in other words, if a student is struggling to attend school for non-medical reasons, for non-school approved reasons, we're looking at the removal of some of those privileges that students get to participate in. In other words, we need to make the priority coming to school. That should be the first priority. If there's consistent attendance, by all means, those students should go and enjoy those extra things, like a prom, extracurricular activities, things of that nature. But again, we need to prioritize school attendance there. So we've also incorporated some language that could remove some of those programs for students who are missing excessively via unexcused absences. So those are the objectives and the highlights. We wanted to start with that just to make sure you all, as you were being, as Dr. Perkins was explaining the language to you, you understood our intention. That's what we're hoping to do as a team. These were our priorities. We certainly welcome your feedback, but I'll pass it off to Dr. Perkins.
Thank you, Mr. Marani. I do just, before I go over the language, I know Mr. Marani mentioned the team, but I do just want to again thank them. And in particular, I really do want to thank Gail Cavallo, the president of the QEA. She was extremely helpful in putting together, as was the vice president, Michael Ellis, who's also the department head. The entire team was excellent, and we really got some great feedback. And so we're really happy with the work that we accomplished, and we're excited for your questions and comments. But I did want to take a minute to just thank them for their support and their assistance in putting this together. So what you have in front of you is you have the full language, the edited language in front of you, but this is kind of just a summary of that. So we didn't put the entire policy in these slides. We just put what we thought were the big ticket items. I do just want to point out that in the attendance policy, we did edit, although it's not on the screen, we did edit the middle school days to match the high school days. So when we talk about the 4 or more, we also put 4 or more in the middle school language. So we were trying to get as streamlined as possible with both policies. So students, I'll just go right to it. The first sentence is exactly the same, that they're expected to be in class 100% of the time. Students who have 4 or more absences, not school approved from class or school during a marking period, shall receive a reduction of 1.25 credits for each class missed. A student who exceeds 15 total credits within a school year may be required to meet with the principal, assistant principal, and/or designee along with the student's parents or guardians to establish an attendance plan. On the third absence, the parent or guardian shall be notified. And so you'll see a lot in both of the policies. We used a lot of may. We may do this, like for instance, when Mr. Marani talked about the incentives, it's an option that if a student is really struggling, that we may use incentives as a carrot to get that student to come to school. So we're really doing our best because we want our students to be in school. That is the priority. So loss or reduction of course credit due to this attendance policy infraction will not require a student to repeat the course, nor will it impact a student's grade point average. However, the student may need to pass an additional course to earn the credits necessary per the Quincy Public Schools graduation policy. So they may need to earn additional credits, and we'll talk about what we have talked about in terms of what credit recovery could look like for students. But it doesn't necessarily, if they pass that course even though they were out over the attendance policy timeframe, but they pass that individual course, they don't necessarily need to repeat that course, but they do need to make up those credits somehow, some way in order to graduate. So just going on, so this is unexcused tardies and dismissals. And again, Mr. Marani mentioned it, but this is something the team felt very strongly about because oftentimes students will come in late or they will get dismissed, and it is the same classes that they are missing all of the time. So it really does impact their progress in the classroom. And again, it's about educating students, and that's not what's happening if they're not in their room, whether they're tardy, they're dismissed, or they're absent. So students with unexcused tardies shall be issued the following penalties. So we did edit this a little bit. In the previous language, it was 5 tardies. We have on the third tardy in a term, it will result in a mandatory detention. The rest of the language is exactly the same, so I won't go read that to you. And then on the 4th, so we went down from 6, we went to 4. On the 4th and subsequent occasions in a term, it could result, or it may result, in further disciplinary action. This is changed a little bit. I think in the previous language, it had said it might result in a suspension. We said disciplinary action to give the principal and the deans and the assistant principal some leeway. And then students who miss half or more of a class due to unexcused dismissals, tardies, and or other non-school approved purposes shall be considered absent from that class. And then to the credit recovery options for attendance. So students who lose credit will have the opportunity to recover credit. So we already have our traditional summer school programs. We have our Quincy Evening High School programs. And we also talked about other school approved programs. So for instance, Saturday schools, vacation programs, online options for students to recover courses. Or students could potentially have contracts with the principal or the teacher to make up some of those credits that they were missing, especially if you have a student who first term is over the 3 credits, say they're absent 6 times first term, but then the second term they are attending and they are coming and they're not chronically absent. We would absolutely expect the school and the principal to work with that family to figure out a reasonable option to make up that 1.25 credits from the first term prior to the end of the school year. So they would work with the teacher, they could put together an attendance plan to make up whatever they needed to so that they could get those credits back. So we intentionally left the other school-approved programs a little bit broad because we see this as something that there could be lots of ways that students could make up credits. And so for the second policy is the grading policy. And so I will go through this again. You have this in front of you, the edited version. So just to review what the current grading policy is, currently we have a numeric system at the high school level. And I will say we did a lot of research on the grading policy. We looked at surrounding towns. Quincy is one of the few cities that at the high school level uses a numeric grading system. Most school systems in Massachusetts use the letter grading system. And so currently we have the numeric grades from 0 to 100. And again, another unique thing for Quincy, as Mr. Marani said, is that the minimum passing mark is a 63. With other passing grades ranging between 64 and 100. And then we do still have letter grades for physical education, which are satisfactory and unsatisfactory. And at the middle school level, we do have additional courses like art, music that also use satisfactory and unsatisfactory. And students in different points could potentially receive an I for an incomplete course or an M for a medical. So the 63 is unique to Quincy. Other districts, the passing score is a 60, and F is a 59. So that is absolutely, we could not find that anyplace else that the passing mark needed to be a 63, that an F was a 62 or below. So that is absolutely unique to us. And you know that we have the different levels of courses. And so some of the things that we talked about, and the reason why we're bringing this to you today, is because the passing mark for us is greater than most nearby districts. I think we would say pretty much all of them. We couldn't find one that had the same passing mark. And so this complicates the transcript review process. So when a student moves in, if a student fails with us today, they're going to get a numeric grade. So say they get a 45 and they've failed. A student could move in from Boston or from Weymouth or from Braintree, and they have an F on their report card, and that F is going to translate to a 62. So our students in Quincy actually fail with a lower grade than a move-in student. So there's like an equity issue there that we'd really like to resolve. In Quincy Public Schools, students experience 3 different grading systems, which we think is a concern. So they have the standards-based grading system at the elementary school, they have letter grades at the middle school, and then they have numeric grades at the high school. So we really feel strongly that we should align that. As I mentioned, the majority of districts in Massachusetts use letter grades, and also the majority of colleges in Massachusetts use letter grades. So for all of these reasons, we are recommending that we transition to letter grades. And so our proposed amendment language would be that report cards are issued to students at the end of each quarter. In addition, students will receive progress reports from all teachers at the midpoint of each quarter. So they do currently get interim reports. And students will receive a letter grade for each course. The letter grades are as follows: A plus A, A minus, B plus B, B minus, C plus C, C minus, D plus D, D minus, or an F. And then physical education would remain the same. It would be an S for satisfactory or U for unsatisfactory. And again, we kept the students may also receive an incomplete or an M for a medical for any course. And obviously the course levels are the same. And we are recommending that we move our failure threshold to match the surrounding districts, so that we are recommending that an F would be below a 60, so a 59 or lower. So if you fail with this letter system, it would equate to a 59. And there's a few more changes in the actual policy. We cleaned up some language. We crossed out the interim reports where it was in there a couple of times. We put it at the beginning of the new language and took out some of the outdated information. And we also made reference in the new policy. We're suggesting to make reference to the program of studies. We have a really wonderful program of studies document that includes a lot of information. And so we really want to direct families that are looking for information to things like the program of studies and the handbook. And the syllabuses, of course. And so the next steps are that we're here tonight presenting it for you to review and to provide us with some feedback. If you have revisions that you'd like us to make, we will make those revisions. And we are hoping that prior to the end of the school year that you would vote on a new, potentially updated policy in these two areas. And then so that we can hopefully implement this in the fall next year. And that we would work with the IT department. We would ensure that attendance and grading is being tracked based on our new language. We would love to create a web page, both for attendance and for grading, that is comprehensive, easy to access, where parents can find all of this information. And we certainly need to do some student and family outreach and communication about these changes, and staff outreach and communication, because what we definitely don't want to happen, we are doing this to try to incentivize or motivate or encourage students to come to school and also to streamline our grading process. But the intent here is not to be extremely harsh or overly harsh or penalize students who have absolute legitimate reasons for not being in school. We want to reiterate that this is unexcused absences, that the part of our policy is very clear that we're proposing to you tonight, that the principal has discretion. So if there are extenuating circumstances, if something comes up, the parent just needs to reach out to the school, and the principal does have discretion and can work with that family if we need to in those kinds of situations. And there's also an appeal process. I do just want to point out one more thing about the grading policy, is that we are suggesting that we wait. The attendance policy, that we are suggesting that we wait a year, that we start with for the seniors, so that we expect them to follow the policy. However, we don't deduct the credits next year, because we're not sure what the unintended consequences of that would be for seniors with not a lot of time to make up those credits. And so what we don't want to do is cause a problem for someone to graduate. So we are suggesting that we start deducting the credits next year with the class of 2027, which would be the juniors. So freshmen, sophomore, juniors this would go into effect for. Seniors, we would expect them to follow it, but we wouldn't be deducting the credits to make sure that everybody graduates. And with that, any questions?
So I know there's a number of questions. First of all, thank you. Important discussion, especially in light of the changes at the state with the chronic absenteeism definition. We're up against the clock for the 6:30 meeting, but the vice chair has said that we can continue the subcommittee meeting. What I'd like to do is start with the members of the subcommittee, if I could. If they have any questions, then we'll go to the full committee. And I'm sure there'll be plenty of questions. Mrs. Cahill. Is that you?
So this is a lot.
Yeah.
And I have like the 3 different packets from the, the different things that it sent us. One of the things that there are some places where things are at the discretion of like a principal or, someone in the building. I'm a proponent for making sure that we have the same conversation at every level in every school, And there's a couple of places where I see something like, in the middle school section, it says the nurse council follows up on consecutive absences or after a pattern of absences by speaking to the student. So that's like on the first page of the middle school. And this is just an example, meaning what, that nurse and counselor, they take it upon themselves to see a pattern of absences and they speak. So when would we do that? When would we have a district-wide saying at the 4th absence, we're going to bring them in, the counselor's going to talk to them, or, you know what I mean? Like, I think we have to be very clear with all of this, that every school has the same process, language, recommendations. I think they all have to be the same in every school, so that we're not saying someone in one school has a situation that, based on the principal's, ideas that, okay, well, we can make an exception here, but then the same situation might be at a different school, and it's not going to get the same kind of result. So, and that can be something else, I don't know if it should be in this policy or not, but is that something that you have a thought about? Like, have you thought about that? Making sure that some of the stuff is consistent across the board?
Yeah, we did put on the bottom, on the bullet underneath there, we put 3 days for the middle school, but we can repeat that at the top, that if it's through, I mean, right now, the schools call, in middle school, all of our schools call, if a student is absent, they call, and unless the parent has called in. If the parent has not called in, then the school will call and do an attendance call. But in terms of the nurse or the counselor, we could certainly put the, after the 3rd day to match the rest of the policy. Because we've been going by like 3 days, so 4 or more is kind of our threshold for both policies. So we certainly could just add that number in there, that the schools, that would be the expectation.
Well, like
Which I would believe that I would honestly say that probably the nurses do now. If a student is out for a couple days in a row, especially at the middle school, people do call and check in, whether it's the nurse or the counselor. So I do think that's the typical practice, but I think we
Like
could
on the
add it.
3rd day, maybe
Yes.
on the 3rd day, the nurse or the counselor will, because even there's a place where it says excessive dismissal should be reviewed by the principal, assistant and principal, and/or designee. This review may be initiated by a faculty or staff. So should that be initiated by the 3rd day? And instead of
Yep.
just being, I think that's maybe in a couple of places where, for me, I felt like we should have a little more detail so that it's not left up to anyone to kind of determine when they're going to do, have something. And so then, in the middle school one, it says, the 4th and subsequent occasions in a term may result in further disciplinary action as determined by the principal, assistant principal, or designee. Even that, so if the principal at Central has their determined disciplinary action, is it going to be consistent with someone at Southwest? So, I mean, that's, again, something that I think, I hate to put too much on the
That's
plate
okay,
and
yeah.
changes, but I think that maybe that might be something we might want to think about. I'm just
Sure.
throwing it out there, and my
Yeah.
colleagues can weigh in. I also had a question about the credits. So where you have that the credits are going to be, okay, so you get 4 unexcused, it's 4 unexcused absences. And again, we need to make that clear, unexcused. If it's not, if you're excused and you have a notice, all that, you could be out for a week because you're sick and whatever the problem might be. Now, if you have 4 unexcused absences, you receive a reduction of 1.25 credits per course, right? And that's every quarter.
Correct.
Okay. Now, what this is saying here is that if a student exceeds 15 total credits within a school year, they may be required to meet with the principal, assistant principal, designee, along with the student's parents to establish an attendance plan. Are we waiting until the end of the year for that? Like, so could they be losing 15 credits in 2 quarters?
I mean, technically, yes, they
Mathematically,
could, yeah.
They could. And our assumption when we wrote it is that it would be identified as that 15 arrives. So whether that's, second quarter, third quarter, or fourth quarter, whenever that 15 credit limit is hit, that's when it's addressed. So we wouldn't wait to address it to the
That's what I
end
mean.
of the year.
Yeah,
No.
okay. So like 15 credits could be, if they have 4 classes, 1, 2, 3, 4, that's 5 in a quarter, right? 5, 10, 15, it would be like 3 quarters. If a student is really excessive and maybe it needs to be less than that, I think is what I'm thinking. Because if a student is taking 5, how many courses they take a quarter?
They take 8 at Quincy High or
Oh,
7 at
8.
North.
Okay,
Uh-huh.
so 8 would be, that's
10.
8, 9, 10, 11, whatever, the
That's
math,
10.
I'll leave that
Yeah,
to you.
10.
So, okay, that makes sense then. And then I think in a communication piece with parents, for me, would be, do parents really understand the credit piece? And how the credits really impact their students in graduation and what they need. So if we add this in here, which I think I leave that to you. I think we really need to figure out to make sure that we are communicating that as soon as, if this policy is implemented, like consistently in the beginning, so that people understand that this can really impact the kids and when they're going to graduate. So that would be one thing, that really making sure. I don't know if you find that families really even understand that piece. Do you?
I think as the student progresses along, maybe in high school, they understand it more. Probably when they first start in high school, they don't really understand it.
Yeah,
But there are requirements, like you need this many years of, this many credits. And the credits, in order to progress to the next grade level, that's what our current policy is. So you need however many, credits
Right.
in order to go from a freshman to a sophomore, like those kinds of things. So I think people understand it as they progress on, but we definitely recognize that this would need to be strongly communicated, that we would have to do a real PR campaign to push this out so that families know. And I will say that, in my opinion anyways, and I think that Mr. Marani and the superintendent would agree, at the middle school level, the amount of, because there isn't the amount of outreach or work or things that go into getting these kids into school. And it's not to say that the high school doesn't do that, they do, but these students come up and these families come up understanding that they're getting letters saying you're chronically absent. We're doing all these things at middle school. And then they get to high school and they can have six freebies. Six freebies right in the first term, and there is literally nothing we can do about it. There is no incentive, and so I think that, if you look currently right now today at the grade level for each of our grades, right? Just take Quincy High School for an example. The freshman class on an average ranges around 94 to 95% attendance. Our senior class is around, 89. Somewhere around there. It gets progressively worse as the years go on because they
They have their
know
credits.
know that they have 6 days that they can play with each quarter, and it's going to be okay.
yeah. I personally don't have any issue
Yeah.
with the 4. I think that's appropriate and it's fine. People have their opportunity if they're not well and they have issues that, they have excused absences. That's fine. I think my biggest thing is parents understanding the credits.
Yep,
Because, parents are usually looking to see if you're failing a class or doing well or whatever by a grade. So I think that's super important for us. 16 days is, I think, fine. It's under what DESE is requiring from, a couple of days less, so that gives us some
Wiggle room.
wiggle room. And then and for me, if there's some language in there that makes it consistent communication, consistent protocol and procedures for all of our schools, I think is important, so that we're not going to have a situation where someone's going to say, well, they did it this way, and my other kid's at this school, and they're doing it this way. I think that's important, so.
Absolutely, we can
that-
tighten that up. Yep.
And that's it for me. Thank you.
Mrs. Lebo?
I find some of the language confusing for me, so I'm wondering about the parents. In the first attendance A statement, you said, you don't call it an unexcused absence. Here, you call it not school approved. So I think it should be called an unexcused absence, because that's what we're calling it everybody else.
Yep.
So that really confused me a lot in that particular thing. And then in the next, there was another thing up there too. Oh, where you say a reduction of per course, a student with the principal, when it gets to the 15, was it the 15? It should say a reduction of 15 total points, because it doesn't make any sense, that didn't make any sense to me either. You know, who exceeds a reduction of 15 points? If that's what you're calling it up top, I'd like you to call it down there, just to make it clearer for parents. And then in the C paragraph, I'm really confused about that. So absences require parent guardian approval. After the third absence, a valid professional note is required. After the third absence in a row, consecutive days?
Just in
So if a kid is
total.
absent 3 times in the term, their parent's note doesn't work for them on the 4th time they're absent. You're requiring a professional note.
So the professional note, that's actually what we currently do. So if a student is, absent, right now it's the 6th, but if a student is absent, in order to make those absences, excused, we require a note. So maybe we just need to, clarify the language,
Yeah,
but
that confused me.
Yeah.
That really did confuse me. And then also in that paragraph, you say, that, parent or guardian on the day the student returns to school, semicolon, religious observance. I think it should say religious or cultural, because that's what we have in our, I think it shouldn't just say religious there. Because our calendar, I believe, says cultural.
Yep.
So I'd like that changed. And with respect to what Mrs. Cahill shared about part 2, number 2 on the other page, I respectfully disagree with that. I think it's incredibly important that the principals have some discretion. They know their kids, they know their kids' families, and the principal at Central does not know what that kid's going through. So I understand her wanting some consistency, but I don't, you have to give the principal some discretion here, because they know the kids, they know what's going on in their families. That's just my opinion, but I feel pretty strongly about that. And you want to hear about my grading system issues?
sure.
Oh, I have one question, too. Students who miss half or more of a class due to unexcused dismissals, tardies, and/or other non-school approved purposes shall be considered absent from that class. I don't see that in the policy anywhere. It's in the PowerPoint, but H, I don't see it. I couldn't find it.
It's on the second page, H.
In the attendance policy?
Yes, yep.
So at what point are they considered absent from school?
If they, so
Say they
typically,
come in
it's-
at noontime.
yeah, I mean, they would certainly be considered absent for all those classes that they missed. They wouldn't necessarily be considered absent from the classes that they attended.
It's a way to game the system.
Yeah.
It is a way to game the system, but whatever. I really think the grading policy is a huge, huge correction. We've been talking about that for 10 years, that it should be grades. And I love the fact that there's a bottom line, so no kid, especially the first term, winds up with like a 40
Right.
or whatever, which is almost impossible to recover from.
Can't bury a kid.
Yeah, you can't bury a kid. You used to be able to bury a kid, but you can't bury a kid here with this. So I am very, very pleased with the grading policy. I haven't got any clarification language in that at all, so I think it's well done.
Thank you.
And complete support.
Thanks.
All right, we have a lot more questions. We're going to go with Mr. Bergoli, Mrs. Perdios, and then Mrs. Hewley.
Thank you for all the work. It's a monumental task, it really is. As Mrs. Lebo said, we've been looking to get the grading system consistent at all levels, because it's confusing when you go from elementary to middle and high school, and you get 3 different grading systems. So I'm glad that we're finally moving into getting letter grades at the high school. Just to follow up on Mrs. Lebo's question, there was an unwritten understanding that if you attended class for the first 3 classes and then left, you were considered in school. You weren't considered absent. Now, I'll just give you an example as to what happened to me when I coached. Tom Brady won the Super Bowl, they had a parade, we had a game at Situate. My kids were told, yeah, you can go to the parade as long as you go to the first 3 classes or whatever it was. They all did that. And they were all punished for that, so, after the fact. And we had to forfeit the game that night against Situate. Because our kids were told that it was okay, because there was nothing in writing. And I still don't see anything in writing to address that, and I would like to see that somewhere. At what point in the day are you considered absent, even if you come in?
So I think that the complicated thing about that, Mr. Vigoli, is that according to the Department of Ed, if you are in school, I think until like 11:30 or something, you're considered present. Even though if you get dismissed, you may have missed, the last couple of classes. However, that's why I actually think this policy actually works for that, because although the student, may, according to the Department of Ed, may be considered present, when you look at, it's the difference between a whole day versus individual courses. And so the student, even though the student might be considered present in terms of attendance, if they are unexcused dismissed in the afternoon, they would be marked absent for those classes. And that then could potentially fall into this credit reduction. So we are actually holding, and I think that's why the teachers felt so strongly about making sure that we incorporated tardies and dismissals, is because kids do leave. They do want, once kids turn a certain age, in some cases, they can dismiss themselves.
Right.
And so I think that was one of the reasons why they really felt strongly, because it's not just looking at it in terms of a school day attendance, it's also looking at it in terms of by course.
So is there any place where we can put that in terms of,
We could, however, I would be a little bit nervous about doing that, only because I feel like then that is telling kids, if you're in school until 11:30, you're all set. You can leave after that. So I would just be a little nervous about the wording of that, because certainly we want kids in school all day.
right?
Girls, don't tell anyone that. Those two back there.
Credits to progress from one grade to another, you addressed that. You didn't address going from middle school to high school. And I think that's an issue, it has been an issue, where kids who are in 8th grade have failed miserably in their coursework, yet they go to high school. And they're no more ready than my first kindergarten grandson to do that. I mean, it's like, we're setting them up for failure if we don't have some type of consequence. Or, do we retain kids anymore? You say, no, you can't move on because you haven't satisfied the requirements for going on to the next grade.
We don't often retain them, but we do use summer school. So we do have, we're going to talk about summer school later in the meeting today, but we do have summer school programs, and that, we target for kids who are failing out, all of their courses are, significantly behind. We also have alternative programs like the PASS program and,
Right.
that we use to really help those kids. So we don't typically retain, because we don't want like a 16-year-old in 8th grade,
I know.
at middle school.
Right.
So, you know, so it's a balance. It really is a balance. But, you know, once they do hit high school, as you know, and I think is what you're saying, is that once they fail everything, they will not have the credits to progress to the next grade level. And so those are students that I know Mrs. Papil works with all the time, I work with all the time, you know, and that's why we are so fortunate in Quincy that we have so many specialized programs. I think that that's more of the way to go to help some of these students who are really struggling and failing everything, is to look at, like, how can we get them into a program that can support them and get them back on track.
I'm just concerned about the kiddo that says, I don't have to go to school, I don't have to pass anything. Because I can go to some school, I can go to a program,
Right.
and then move on. And then I'm still not prepared.
Yeah.
It's not like being in class and having rigors of requirements from the teacher that you're in front of. And I have another question about, a lot of our kids are tardy, they think they can sleep until 9 o'clock, so consistently missing the first period.
Yes.
And if it's
That does
English,
happen.
then is that English first period all through the year? Or do we rotate the
The
classes?
two high schools have different schedules, so
That's
they
an
do
issue, too.
rotate somewhat, but North rotates differently than Quincy High. So like North morning, I think, rotates, but not their after, like their middle block stays the same. Don't quote me on it, but they definitely do rotate, and Quincy High rotates too. It was like a day one, you know, they have an 8 period. They don't
Yeah.
have 8 periods every day.
Right.
One of those classes gets, you know, you don't, there's one class you don't have every day, and the schedule rotates.
Okay. And then eligibility,
Explaining that.
Mr. Moran, eligibility, okay? A kid fails 2 classes, they're not eligible for athletics, am I correct?
I would have to look at that policy language. I don't know for sure if it's exactly 2 failures equals, I think is it 2 failures or is it
Yeah, it's 2.
GPA?
That's an
based?
MIA policy, am I correct?
Oh, okay.
I believe it's 2
yeah.
classes, yeah.
Yeah. So, we haven't even mentioned that here, and I think we should. I think we should put it front and center that, you know, you fail 2 classes, you can't play. That's the requirement. That was the whole purpose of progress reports, when we implemented the progress reports years ago. That, you know, the coach was responsible for his kids, even in the off-season. Because a kid that's failing 4th quarter is not eligible to play in the fall.
Right.
So, I mean, those things are, I mean, they don't affect the whole population. I'm sorry,
That's actually in the athletic policy. It's in another policy.
it's another
Hang on,
policy.
It's in athletics.
Repeat that?
That policy that you're talking about with regard to the number of failures that makes you either eligible or ineligible to play athletics is in a athletics policy, which we can get you a copy of.
No, I should know that because I'm the chair.
Are we all set, Mr. Bergoli?
I am, because I know, I'm looking at the time.
Mrs. Perdios?
Thank you. Thank you for the work. The grading policy, I'm totally on board with. No questions, no concerns on that. So there's your good news. I do have a bunch of questions and concerns on the attendance policy, however. I thought maybe I'd start with the middle school ones. And maybe you could guess where I'd start with this, but the middle school attendance policy, does this apply to the 5th graders that are at Point Webster and Southwest?
Not typically, we don't typically, we don't have an attendance policy for elementary school. So we just work with those families, work those cases, and I will say, it can be, for some kids, attendance can be a concern, but usually in the elementary school, it's not as large, it's like smaller populations of kids. But no, I would say it would be 6 to 8.
So can we specify that? Can we say that this is not applicable to 5th graders at Point Webster and Southwest? To make that clearer for that. So what credit impact is, you had said you wanted to make them the same between the middle and high school. What credit impact is it for the middle school kids? There is no credit impact, right?
There's no credits they don't have credits like
Right, so
at the
there's
high
really
school.
no, there's really not any kind of academic disincentive
Yeah.
to being absent 4 or more times,
I
correct?
think it's harder for kids to keep up at middle school, honestly, when they're chronically absent. Just because of their developmental age and what the things that they're just dealing with at the middle school level. But I also think that a big difference that people might not be aware of between the middle and the high school is that when students get to high school, when they turn 16, which a lot of freshmen are kind of on the cusp, they're like 15 or, just about to be 16, we have no juice to keep them to school. And not that we do this often, but when they're in middle school, if you're not sending your student to school, we could potentially be calling DCF. Like we could be filing, there's things that we could be doing, because they're little, but when they hit 16, that doesn't apply. And so we can't use that. So, so although there might not be academic, penalties, there's certainly other significant things that can happen to chronic, people that are chronically absent and again, we don't do that lightly or often, but every once in a while at the middle school level, we do have a student who, and it's really hard because when they're little, it's not the student, the student isn't getting themselves to school, and families have so many things going on, we try to work with them. We try to remediate that issue before, ideally, we'd love to remediate that issue before they get to high school. And it does start to have consequences that impact their academics.
No, for sure. Last question on middle school, and then I have a bunch for high school too. But for the middle school policy, it says that all absences require a note of explanation from the parent guardian. I don't think does that happen? I mean, I've called my kiddo out sick a number of times and never provided a note.
I'm sorry, where are you? again?
So the middle school attendance
Oh.
and tardiness policy, about halfway down that first attendance page, it says all absences require a note of explanation from the parent guardian.
I think that's just that we didn't change that. I think that just
Yeah.
was existing language. We didn't edit it. I mean, certainly if the committee wants us to, take, I think that every parent writes a note? No. But I think that you do expect parents to call.
Right, could we put that in, like a call or a note, just to reflect what's actually happening? I've never been asked for a note when one of my middle schoolers was out. So just if that's not what's happening and approved, then maybe we should just update that. All right, so the high school attendance is where I have kind of a bunch of questions, so bear with me. So on paper, I understand what we're doing. I understand we don't want kids out for 28 classes. I get that. I understand chronic absenteeism has been a problem that we've been addressing, but if we're talking about at the worst 89% of our kids are not chronically absent, it feels like a lot of change and effort and work to really just address 11% of the high school kids. And I fear that this is going to have a lot more consequences for the 89% that are actually doing the right thing, but that just may not quite understand, to Mrs. Cahill's point. I don't know that families quite understand the excused versus the unexcused, whether you have to have a note, how that note gets taken care of. Like, for instance, I think this is how it goes. Just hear me out here. So if a kiddo in high school feeling sick on a day gets dismissed, whatever time, 11, 12, they get dismissed, they go home. The next day, they go to the doctor. They have a sore throat, right? They check for strep. You get a note from the doctor, that day is excused. The next day, strep test is negative, but they're still feeling crappy. They stay home. The day after that, still kind of feeling crappy, stay home. So we have one excused absence out of that 4-day window. And if we want those second 2 days, those last 2 days to be excused, the kiddo has to go back to the doctor and get another note, because that first note isn't covering the fact that the kid's still sick. So what we're I guess my real uncomfortability with this is the inequity it's going to provide for families that can't afford to pay multiple co-pays for a doctor in a week, or that can't take multiple days out of work to take their kid back to the doctor, or transportation issues to get to the doctor. So I just worry that we're going to sort of have some inequity issues where people can't get that doctor note every single time, and these are going to rack up super quick. Like that I just explained, that happens in my house all the time. 4 days, you don't want it to be that way, but it just is. And what are you exactly supposed to do about that? So I just worry that, it's going to create this, like, my kid has to go to summer school because they had, 1 week where they were pretty sick, but not sick enough to go to the doctor every single day. So I just don't quite know how like I say, on paper, I get what we're doing, but I think in practice, this is going to create a lot of problems for kids that aren't the chronic absenteeism problem, right? This is just a kid that has a wonky week or two, or, and if we're sending kids to school kind of sick, everybody's going to get more sick. So I think saying we want them to be there 100% of the time is, to be honest, kind of unreasonable. And if COVID taught us anything, it's to stay home if you're not feeling good, so you're not spreading it to everybody else. So I don't love what we're doing here in that aspect. So maybe I'll just pause there. I do have a couple other questions, but maybe I'll just pause there.
Yeah, so I think, when I said the 89%, that's the daily attendance. That was the daily attendance, like the average daily attendance for the senior class. I don't think you can equate that to 11%. That doesn't take into consideration the kids that are chronically absent. So Quincy High School alone had 32% of the students last year were considered chronically absent. That's huge. Right now alone, I don't even know, we might have 200, the list is massive. Just at Quincy High alone, I'm not even talking about North. There's over 200 students that we are watching right now and have been, and that doesn't even count. That's the kids who are on the cusp. Right, so that's like the kids who are just about to be chronically absent, but they're technically not violating our attendance policy. They're under the days, but I'm pretty sure it's around 200, and that doesn't even include the chronically absent kids. So there's already a whole host. I do you remember the number? I wish I had the number with me, but it's significant of students who are already at this point in the year today considered chronically absent.
Excess of 25%.
Yeah, it was
Closing
between
in on
25 and
28%.
28% today at Quincy High School are considered chronically absent. And there is not, we are trying everything to get these kids to school, but right now our policy is absolutely in disagreement with that. It's 100% in disagreement with that. We have a mandate from the state. The schools held to that for accountability purposes. We sat here with these principals and expressed concerns about the chronic absenteeism numbers. We certainly have expressed concerns and taken that on as an initiative, but the school committee's policy does not support that work. And that's basically what it comes down to. I totally understand what you're saying, and I think I would never expect, and I think that's on us, and we need to do some work with our nurses and with our school administration. I would not expect, if you got a doctor's note and your kid wasn't feeling good and that student was out, you only need one doctor's note. We're not going to make you go back to the doctor 15 times. So I think that's on us for communication to make sure that that's clear to the nurses and the people in the buildings, and I will personally take that on. And we certainly can update you on that and share that with you. But I feel so strongly that we have to do something about this policy. It is hurting us. It's hurting our kids.
Yeah, no, I totally get it. And I think that if we did just do, and maybe there's other things with, just better communication with, if you want to take a cultural religious holiday.
Absolutely.
Better communication with how you do that to get an excuse. Because I know if you just call in, we're sick, it can't be anecdotal. You need to have a note. So we need better communication to families that that's how they need to get an excused absence. But I think working with the nursing staff for sure at the high school, I know they're pretty strict about it. So I know we really do. I mean, you're dealing with a sick kid. You don't want to have to, dot every I and cross every T to try to,
Right.
meet it when your kiddo's sick. You're trying to deal with that. obviously it's the same sickness. So I appreciate that. And I think working with,
Ms. Perdio, sorry to interrupt
Yeah,
you. Ms.
no.
I would, we could absolutely put some, it doesn't need to be school committee policy, but some procedures. We could write out, with Andrea Hewer, and write out some procedures that we share with every single school. So I think that addresses Ms. Cahill's point too. And we can share those with the committee as well, to write out procedures for some of these things that people have concerns about, so we know it's fair and it's equitable and everybody's handling it, the
sure.
same way.
Yeah.
Obviously with the, when you have extenuating circumstances, giving the principal that latitude to be able to do what they need to do for that family.
Gotcha. And just the last area I wanted to just ask a question about was the credit recovery. So first, I'm just wondering how, so as you mentioned, Quincy has 8 courses and North has 7. So if we're missing full days, we're talking about Quincy High having to make up 10 credits and North Quincy having to make up 8.75 credits. So we already have a little bit of an inequity there. How many credits are each full year course worth usually on, like an average?
So
on?
they're five, but I will just say, it's not really an inequity because the credits don't work in the same way at both high schools. So the number of credits that you need to move from, say, 9th to 10th at North is less than it is at Quincy High.
Okay.
So that's been historical. Was actually in our other policy that we did
Right.
recently. But so even though they might have to make up less credits, it's just as important because they need those in order to move to the next grade level.
Okay, so is there, so you're saying basically if one term this happens, a kid or Quincy, well, both actually, schools would need to make up 2 classes in the summer's worth of credits, 2 courses,
Essentially. Yeah.
for missing 4 days in one term. You would have to make up 2
Not necessarily. They have to make up 1.25 credits if it's only
Per
been
class.
one. Per class. If it's only been one term.
Right, so if they miss
yeah. Mm-hmm.
4 full days of school, they have to make up 2 full years' worth of credit classes over the summer. That feels a little extreme, to take 2 full classes worth for missing 4 days. Like if a family goes on vacation, you're now having to take the equivalent of 2 full classes. Is that even work in Saturdays? I mean, it
Well,
just
I
feels
think-
a little
yeah.
hefty.
No, I see, and we talked a lot about that actually, but I think that that's why we put other school approved, because I absolutely think that in C, and again, this is something, maybe doesn't belong in a policy, but maybe in terms of like what this could potentially look like, because, if your first term, that happens to you, and then you recover second term, I absolutely expect that the teacher and the principal and the family and the student are going to work together to figure out how that student can make up those credits. Because especially what we want is for the student to get back on track, and the student to come to school. And so the student starts coming and they hardly ever miss. And for, now second term, they're doing awesome. They can come up with an attendance plan for how the student could recoup those credits, not having to go and do a full summer program or whatever.
I'd like to
So-
see those options listed a little bit, and I know you want to keep it open-ended, but I'd love to see like what some of those
Yeah.
ideas are, because it just feels a little too nebulous for me to sort of understand, to be comfortable sort
Mm-hmm.
of saying, because a lot of this isn't on the kid, right? So, I mean, in high school, you still have parents driving kids, so if they're tardy, if they're late, that may not be on the kid, that may be on the
Right,
parent.
right.
And if they have to go on vacation, if their family plans a vacation for a week and takes them out of school, that may not be the kid's decision. So I'm sort of trying to allow for those items where like, it's not really fair to have a kiddo come in the summer to take 2 classes worth of credits if it's their family's decision that they're going to see, a family over in Japan or something for the week of vacation and the week after. Do you know what I mean? It's a little, it makes me a little uncomfortable on
Yeah,
that.
so what we could do is, I don't think it should go in the policy because I do think we do need a little bit of discretion, but I do think that, that what we could do is type up a list of like what this could look like some examples of how we could intervene and share that with you all at the next meeting. I also just want to say, if a student, not that we condone vacations because we're not condoning vacations, however, we do have written into the policy that if it's for like a family situation or something, that family can appeal to the principal and the principal can grant that as an excused absence. We're not talking like Disney World, But, if there's, we do recognize that we have students that have to travel for funerals or life things that happen. And that we would expect that that would then be considered an excused absence.
Okay, yeah, and to Ms. Cahill's point, hopefully that would be a little equitable across the schools of what would be allowed.
Yep.
So, yeah, no, thank you, and I appreciate the time for the questions.
Mrs. Hubley?
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Be brief, because I know we have to get to our main meeting. So with the middle school, and as you pointed out about the vacations, if we could put, some of these things would be great to put in, like, make sure they're in the handbooks, because I get asked that question a lot about family vacations. And if we could put right in the handbooks that family vacations during the school year are not condoned, following the absence, the student is expected to make up missed work at the discretion of the teacher. I mean, that right there.
Yep.
That could put right in the handbook, beginning of the year, have the principal talk to the students about that and make sure the students
Yes.
are aware of that. So when it's happening at home, and the parents are planning the trip to Disney World, that they know the kids can say, and this is middle school, they can say, hey, Mom, my teacher said this.
Right,
And
yes.
they hear it at the beginning of the year.
Yep.
Also, with that same note, with the loss of privileges at the beginning of the year, when the principal has all the kids in the auditorium and he's telling them the rules of the year, that would be something that would be great to bring up at the beginning of the year, and also put that in the
Definitely.
handbook, so that they
Yes.
are aware that if they are absent, the amount of times that would be reflective of losing privileges to go to the prom, they would know this at the beginning of the school year, that
Right.
this could be a possibility. So they are aware of
Absolutely.
it. So it's not
Yep.
like a surprise at the end of the year when they're absent all these days and they're being told, hey, this is a possibility. They now know it at the beginning of the year.
Yes.
And when they are, I was gonna say, I have my scratches here. The mandatory detention, is that scheduled detention? Because I know for our high schoolers, a lot of them have jobs, or a lot of them are watching their siblings after school. So this would have to be something that would be checked with their families to get coverage and so on and so forth. So would this be a scheduled
Yes.
detention? Okay, that might
Yep.
be something we might want to add so they know
Sure.
that. And when parents are calling to say that my student is not going to be in school, my child's not going to be in school today, are they reminded that they should be sending in a note if they're sick or whatnot? Or if they have are
I
they
think
told this
that-
over the phone?
I do think they are reminded of that. I don't want to say every single time, but I do think if someone calls and says, my student has strep throat, they say, just send in a note. I do think that does happen, but certainly, I think probably, I definitely have heard the concern to tighten that up a little bit and make sure that we're communicating that to the schools and that's clear.
All right, and this is something that could also be put in the handbook, make sure that it's in there, that if you're being called out, that you are sending in a note.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, I have one question, and then we'll talk through next steps. So you said you did a lot of research on grades, the letter grades, and everybody universally practically does letter grades. How do other communities deal with the 18 excused absences? We're doing 4 a quarter, right? Essentially. So that's 16. That gets you to 16, so you have a little bit of wiggle room. What is the discussion that you've had with other districts about how they're managing?
Well, we got the credits from other districts. I don't remember. I think might have been Braintree, maybe?
Braintree?
Yeah. So we definitely looked at other districts as well. I think we're in line. Everybody uses the chronic absenteeism language. I would say the majority of districts use they may not be as specific as ours, but they all reference the chronic absenteeism language. That is absolutely, the case.
Got it. Okay, so your objective here is to get us to take action at the next meeting. I'm assuming you're going to get us a revision.
We'll get you the
So
revisions, yep.
my preference would be that it could be on the actual agenda at the next meeting so that we could have a discussion if there is. And then I guess we've historically had a policy that it has to sit for a meeting. I assume that's the meeting that it sits. And then we can act on it at the meeting in June. Is that your desire?
That would be wonderful.
Okay, any,
Can I just make one?
1 second?
Just-
Vice Chair?
I just want to go back to the point with Mrs. Lebo too, about the principal discretion and all that. And I think what you mentioned, we don't necessarily have to change that in the policy, but maybe have procedures
Yes.
as a side, side document that will lay out what
Absolutely.
all the process and procedures will be. So the policy can be that, and then just have something that gives us an indication of how principals across the board would
Yep.
deal with special occasions or special instances.
Absolutely. And we can draft
Okay?
that and share
Yeah.
it with you at the next meeting.
Yeah,
For you
and
to
that,
look
that may
at.
not necessarily have to be a vote, I don't know, but the policy, yes, so.
Certainly to review and
Yeah.
let us know if you have any
Okay.
concerns.
All right, good.
And then just two things I want to say. One, I want to thank the vice chair for allowing us to go 45 minutes into the school committee meeting tonight. And two, I think collectively, we should think through when there are big issues that are coming before us, allotting enough time in subcommittee, so if we had to dial it back 30 minutes earlier. So I just say that for whoever's coming before a subcommittee in the future. Chat with the chair of that subcommittee to make sure that the 15 or 30 minutes that are allotted are going to be sufficient to deal with the issue.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
We, subcommittee stands adjourned, and I'll turn it over to the vice chair. Okay, hang on a second. Should I go over to my seat? or-
Mayor's not-
Well, the mayor's not coming. so-
Yeah,
he's not.
it's instead, yeah.
Stay.
The school committee meeting for Wednesday, May 7th. Let's all stand. Oh, we need a roll call, please.
Mr. Begoli? Present. Mrs. Cahill?
Present.
Mr. Guttrow?
Present.
Mrs. Hubley? Present. Mrs. Lebo? Mrs. Perdios? Present. Mayor Coe? Quincy High School Student Representative Mary Jula Yamini. Thank you for being here tonight. And North Quincy High School Student Representative Amy Tan. Thank you for being here tonight.
Let me get their mics on, too. Let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
under God, indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all.
for all. And we do not have any memoriams tonight. So we're at the open forum section, which is an opportunity for community input regarding the Quincy Public Schools. Community in this context is defined as a resident of the city of Quincy, a non-resident parent of a student who attends the Quincy Public Schools, or a non-resident employee of the Quincy Public Schools. After giving his or her name and address, each speaker may make a presentation of no more than 3 minutes to the school committee. An individual may not exchange their time or yield to others. Residents or non-community persons may submit written statements of up to 300 words to the school committee at qscopenforum@quincypublicschools.com by 4 p.m. on the day prior to the posted school committee regular meeting. Written statements will be posted on the school committee section of the Quincy Public Schools website by noon on the day of the posted school committee regular meeting. Is there anyone here tonight that wishes to speak? Try that.
Good evening, White Vice Chair and fellow school committee members. My name is Kylie, 42 President's Ave. I'd like to start with thanking Ms. Lebo for the years of dedication to our community and children. Thank you. This week is Teacher Appreciation Week. It's heartwarming to see the posts from QPS, PTOs, and fellow parents sharing their stories of how teachers changed their lives for the better. I've seen the dedication of my children's teachers during conferences and via print and electronic communications. I don't know if the administrative staff is considered teachers, but they're teachers in my book. In attending the school committee meetings, I see firsthand the dedication that you have for our children, whether it's around the concerns of students missing school, which we spent 45 minutes talking about, and the strategies, how to best get them back on track, or making lunch fun and interesting by exposing them to different cuisines, or the concern for our students' safety and looking for solutions such as renovating De La Chiesa so that Lincoln has the capacity it needs to best serve our children. Or in, I think last or 2 weeks ago, in the meeting where some of the staff walked us through pivotal response training that's being used for our special ed students. I see, hear, and feel their enthusiasm and dedication, and got a taste as well. I can go on and on, but we only have 3 minutes, and we're running late too. On Monday, listened in on to the city council meeting, and I was glad to hear about the 4.2 to 6.6 million increase funding for our schools. I look forward to learning more about that budgeting process. Happy Mother's Day to my wife, my mom, and all the moms out there. And looking forward to next weekend's multicultural festival. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you. Next, we will move to the superintendent's report. Superintendent.
Thank you, and good evening, everyone. Hope everyone is doing well. First item on my agenda is student recognitions. Congratulations, of course, to the North Quincy High School Academic Decathlon team for winning the Division V championship at last weekend's national finals. It's an amazing accomplishment. Congratulations to team members Matthew Amador, Louisa Bayenzi, Emily Coe, Matthew Lynn, Marco Mano, Dahani Palawal, Philip Wang, Stephen Yu, and Coach Benny Diamore on this amazing accomplishment. Again, Division V championship at last weekend's national finals, so congratulations. Southwest Middle School grade 5 student Alexandra Lee recently won an art contest sponsored by ST Math to design a banner that will be used in schools across Massachusetts when the 80% completion mark is reached. So congratulations to Alexandra Lee. On May 8th, Mathematics Curriculum Coordinator Kim Quinn will be presenting at the DZ Math Leaders Network meeting on May 8th. Kim will share Quincy Public Schools' experience with the high-dosage math tutoring, which was recently reviewed with this committee. And of course, how we rolled it out, what we learned, the benefits, et cetera, to math educators from around the state. So thank you to Kim Quinn for doing this on behalf of the Quincy Public Schools. High school athletic updates. Last Friday, May 2nd, Athletic Director Kevin Mahoney presented the request for boys ice hockey to become a co-op team at the Patriot League Athletic Directors meeting. The request was approved, and Kevin has now submitted the request to the MIAA for approval, and we're expecting to hear back later this month. So that is in progress and moving forward. In your backpacks is a copy of the letter from the New England Association of Schools and Colleges, NEASC, confirming the continued accreditation of Quincy High School. The NEASC Commission on Public Schools recommended Quincy High School on a number of important areas, including the staff's dedication to supporting students and the collaboration and connection between adults and students that promote academic and emotional well-being, reinforcing the school's commitment to addressing diverse learning needs. Special thanks, of course, to Principal Ford, Assistant Principal Ed Smith, the department chairs, teachers, and administrators for all of the hard work that went into evaluating and documenting the many strengths of Quincy High School and showcasing the school for the NEAS team. And of course, thank you to the school committee for participating in this process as well. The feedback was excellent. And again, congratulations to the Quincy High School team, and thank you to their team as well. At your places is a copy of the spring concert schedule for our elementary, middle, and high schools. A highlight of the school year, thanks to the music department staff, is also included. You'll also be sent calendar invitations so you can attend these events as your schedules permit. The Quincy Public Schools and City of Quincy events, and there are so many events, so I'll try and go through them as quickly as possible. There will be an English Learner Parent Advisory Council meeting on Thursday, May 8th on Zoom to review the new EL curriculum and share information about summer programs in Quincy with families. The annual Quincy High School Fashion Show will be held on Thursday, May 8th at 6 p.m. in the Lloyd Hill Auditorium, featuring the original creations of our fashion technology students, assisted by students from the broadcasting, graphic design, culinary, and carpentry technology programs. The Snug Harbor PTO is hosting a Touch a Truck event on Saturday, May 10th from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. This is a free family event and all are welcome. On May 12th at Quincy High School and May 20th at North Quincy High School, students from the healthcare technology programs will be recognized in pinning ceremonies. This is a traditional ceremony for healthcare workers, marking the transition from student to professional status. So congratulations to the healthcare tech students as they reach this great milestone. And again, thank you to all of our CVTE teachers too who made this possible for our students. Among the concerts scheduled for May and June are several citywide programs, including the high school spring recital night on May 14th at 6 p.m. at North Quincy High School and the elementary and middle school strings concert on May 19th at 6 p.m. at Quincy High School. Saturday, May 17th is going to be a busy day in Quincy with the annual grades 5 to 8 robotics competition being held at Quincy High School beginning at 10 a.m. The Quincy Multicultural Festival will return to Pageant Field from noon to 3 p.m., showcasing the diverse cultures of our community through music, food, and art. The Montclair Elementary School will host the 89th Annual May Festival from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. The day will wrap up with the concert on the Common at 4 p.m. at Hancock Adams Common, featuring the Quincy Symphony Orchestra, singer Todd Angley, and the combined Quincy High School choral group. So that will be an amazingly busy day, but also an amazing fun day as well. On May 19th, both high schools will host Future Educator Signing Day ceremonies, recognizing graduating seniors who will be pursuing careers in education. Each student invited an educator from their elementary, middle, or high school career who played a significant role in influencing our students' career aspirations. We look forward to potentially welcoming, of course, these students to the QPS staff in the future. The annual art show will be held on Monday, May 19th at 5 p.m. at Quincy High School and Thursday, May 22nd at North Quincy High School at 5:30 p.m. The Quincy Public Schools physical education staff is hosting Community Fitness Night for students and parents in kindergarten through grade 5 on Tuesday, May 20th at 6 p.m. at Veterans Memorial Stadium. The Quincy Retired Teachers Association is hosting the annual scholarship ceremony on May 20th at 7 p.m. at the Central Middle School Auditorium. The QRTA is celebrating their 75th anniversary this year, and Quincy Public Schools is grateful for their continued support of our graduating seniors each year with an amazing generosity through their scholarships provided to over 20 students from the two high schools. So thank you to the Quincy Retired Teachers Association. The middle school spring track season will come to a close on May 21st with the citywide track meet at 3:30 p.m. at Faxon Field. And last but not least, newest QPS families are invited to the Welcome to Kindergarten Parent Academy on Thursday, May 22nd at 6 p.m. at Central Middle School to learn about the curriculum and learning opportunities for their students. So with that, I know there's a lot going on. There's a lot going on in the city. It's all exciting stuff. That does conclude my superintendent's report.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Perdios.
Thank you. I just had one quick question or request. Mr. Mulvey, when we have these, is there a way to put the time and the location on these? I know a lot of parents sometimes refer to these for different citywide.
On the agenda itself?
Yeah,
Sure.
exactly. Just so, if someone's interested in going to the community fitness night, they can easily find out the time and the location.
Sure.
It's great that we have these on there and just love the full information. That'd be great.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Old business, there is none. New business, we have the City of Quincy FY 2026 budget overview by Mayor Koch, which Superintendent.
So, good evening again, everyone. Unfortunately, the mayor could not be with us here tonight. It was his intention to review the city budget with you, in particular, the allocation that will be made to the school department. He does intend to do that at the next meeting. Of course, we will present our budget to you based on the bottom line that the city gives us. I can tell you that the bottom line that the city has given us is very, very generous. It is an increase. It will allow us to level fund and continue all of our programming without any layoffs or reductions in programming. That also includes summer programming as well for our kids, which is great. And I have to thank the mayor, and of course, I'll be presenting to the city council on Monday night, and I'll thank them as well for their generosity and support year in and year out of the school budget. It is a healthy budget. We'll give, of course, a breakdown of that budget to you at our next school committee meeting, and I believe the mayor will also review with you prior to us presenting what he normally would have reviewed with you tonight. But again, the budget is very healthy. Thank you, of course, to the Dr. Perkins and Mr. Mulaney and the SLT for helping us develop the budget necessary to maintain all programming and staffing in the school department, and I think that you'll be pleased with the budget presentation we'll do at the next school committee meeting.
Thank you. Next on our list, we have new business, also Quincy Public Schools Summer Program, Dr. Perkins and Mr. Marani.
Okay, thank you very much for having us again. We are really so thrilled to be here to talk about the summer programming. We've said this before. Given the state of affairs that is, around the nation and in Massachusetts in terms of budgets and cuts and all of the things that have been happening, we weren't sure what our summer programming was going to look like this year. And so I just have to say a big thank you to Mayor Koch and the school committee, always so supportive. Quincy does a phenomenal job at summer programs. I really do not believe there's another school system that does, or city, honestly, that does as much for their kids as Quincy does in the summer months. And so we are so blessed to be here and so excited that we are able to tell the parents out there tonight that we're bringing the summer programs back. So we will just kind of quickly go through them. You've heard them many times before, so if you have questions at the end, you certainly can ask, but we won't go into too much detail. So obviously, the goal for our summer programming is to provide high-quality summer-long experiences, which I absolutely think we do very, very well. And our programs are aligned to the prerequisite standards for the next year's grade level. We really have developed these programs, and we're constantly tweaking and adding to them to make sure that they're focused on academic, but also enrichment, also accelerated learning, and social emotional support as well, and opportunities for wellness activities, so that we're really focusing on the whole student. And we're really focused and have been for years now on providing a range of opportunities for all different interests, all different types of students, so that there's something hopefully for everyone in our summer programs. So back again this year, we've had this for years and years. A tweak to this is that a couple of years ago we added math, but Bridge to Reading and Math, it will be again at Clifford Marshall Elementary School. It's a 4-week program. It's an invitation-only program, and it runs from Monday through Thursday. It is focused on literacy development for students entering grades 1 through 5, and math fluency and number sense skills for those students who need some assistance with that. And also back, this is a very, very popular program, is the Quest for Learning program. This is an enrichment and acceleration STEM summer program. And this actually, there's a little bit of a change to this one. This one is not at Beechwood Knoll this summer. It is at Bernazani. So that's a little bit of a tweak. And so this is a 4-week summer program, again, for students entering grades 1 through 5. And they do so many fun things at this program. They explore literature and authors and different topics. They work on humanities and civics and engage themselves in science activities and technology and math. So they pretty much cover the gamut. And with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Marani to talk about middle school programming.
Thank you, Dr. Perkins. So we are making a slight shift at the middle school level. So Summer Boost will continue on. So that's a 4-week program, and that aims to help students who are struggling academically entering 6, 7, and 8. So those are middle school students who are struggling, and our goal is, one, to help them fill the gaps if they were struggling to keep pace with the cohort of kids that they're with, and or help them avoid regression over the summer. So Summer Boost has not changed. However, Hands-on STEM has changed. So if you remember last year, we had two. We had STEM Academy and we had Hands-on Math. So one issue we encountered with that was with Hands-on Math, we had, let's say, one group of students who were going because they were struggling with math concepts and they really needed to learn kind of the concrete aspects of math so that they could build to the abstract. However, we also had a lot of students who were very advanced in math and they were taking it to another level. And so what we decided to do was to take the concepts from Hands-on Math and embed those in both Summer Boost. So Hands-on Math, the actual supplemental materials, the hands-on materials that will be used at Summer Boost. And it will also be used at Hands-on STEM. Now, the nice part about Hands-on STEM is we also are bringing STEM Academy in there. So again, we're kind of merging these two programs. And so instead of running STEM Academy for 2 weeks, we've merged it to Hands-on STEM and we're gonna run it for 4 weeks, broken up into two-week sessions. And I do just want to point out that those are independent of one another. So a student could sign up for just session 2 for 2 weeks. A student could sign up for just session 1 for 2 weeks, or a student could sign up for 1 and 2 if they wanted to do a 4-week program. So we felt that met the academic needs of our students and also offered a little bit more flexibility for students who wanted to engage for longer periods of time. Because if you remember last year, STEM Academy was 2 sessions, 1 week each for STEM Academy. So this allowed us to kind of create more opportunity for the wide range of learners that we have. They're both at Central Middle School. They both run for the same 4 weeks. We have Quincy Summer Theater Arts Academy. Really nothing to change there because it's such a successful program. We will intentionally do that in the afternoon. So if there are students participating in Summer Boost, something of that nature, they can still participate in Quincy Summer Theater Arts Academy. So it's a great program that culminates in a show that they write, they produce, they being the students, write, produce, and perform in. It's always a great program, so we consistently, we're lucky to offer that along with our other programming. That will take place at Quincy High School. That's for students entering grades 7 through 9. Shifting to high school programming, so we will offer our credit recovery programming as we have in the past. Like last year, ELA, science, math, and history will all be offered as opportunities for students to earn their credits back. One thing I do want to point out is as far as registration goes, there is a registration link in the brochure, which has been that is published, that is accessible. I'll talk about that in a little bit. But there are 2 walk-in registration dates that I just want to verbalize here. This is written in the brochure, but Quincy High School, we will be having a walk-in registration Tuesday, July 1st, 8:30 to 11:30 a.m. And then at North Quincy High School, Wednesday, July 2nd, 8:30 to 11:30. And again, that's if you don't feel comfortable registering online and you have some questions about which courses you should take, you can walk in. We'll have people there to help you with that.
Can you repeat that?
Absolutely. So the walk-in registration at Quincy High School is Tuesday, July 1st, and that will be from 8:30 a.m. until 11:30 a.m. And then the North Quincy High School will be Wednesday, July 2nd, also 8:30 to 11:30 in the morning. And then the program will begin the following Monday, which I believe is July 7th. We will continue on with Ladders to Success. So we have 30 8th grade students. Just a quick reminder, it's the same criteria. We work with principals to identify and select those students, but we look for students that might fall into one or more of the categories: economic disadvantage, English learners, special education students, and or homeless students. Summer Youth Works, I think you could kind of frame this as an extension of Ladders to Success. We have 140 spots. 112 students are returning from last year. They'll get new opportunities in terms of their participation. They'll have a new assignment. And we do have, we work with approximately 40 partners, once again, to help facilitate those opportunities for so many students. So we look forward to that. Great way for students in both 8th grade entering ninth, and then also our current high school students to earn some money during the summer and get some great experience. We have the Early College High School Pathway Summer Academy again. Same programming with the exception of 3 courses being added, so 3 additional opportunities. Writing for Professionals, Business Ethics, and Introduction to Social Work. Those are 3 courses that we did not offer last summer that we are offering. A student can earn up to 8 credits. So if they're taking a lab, that's 4 credits. If they were to take 2 labs, they would get 8. So it's anywhere from 6 to 8 depending on the courses they select. So those are college credits that they can earn over the summer. We're very lucky in the city of Quincy that we have so many students that can take advantage of this. And I do just want to add that we have students, I forgot to mention this in the last one, we do have students that are part of the Summer Youth Works Institute. They get to work part-time and also participate in some of these courses as well. So we have students that can earn some money over the summer while also earning some college credits. Great opportunity.
And for our special education program, we have again the CARES pre-kindergarten program. This is a 5-week program. It is invitation. It's based on a student's IEP, and it's in order to prevent substantial regression. This year, we're happy to announce, will be located at the Dr. Victor Cristofaro Learning Center. So that's very exciting. We have the CARES and the Learning Center program, which is the students basically older than kindergarten, it's a 5-week program, a half-day program, Monday through Thursday, and it will be located at Southwest Middle School this year. And again, it's based on a student's IEP. We also have a couple of other special education programs. These have been in existence. We have the transitional kindergarten program that is part of the Bridge to Reading. It's located at Clifford Marshall. Again, it's a 5-week program. It's for students who are in the transitional kindergarten classroom, and then it's in order to prevent regression. And then the language development class program, again, also a 5-week program at Clifford Marshall for students who are in the language development program. And the middle school program is located at Southwest Middle School. So then, although we have the pre-K and K program, our CARES program that's gonna be at RDLC, we actually have a new program that's gonna be at RDLC, and this is specifically for the students in the K-8 separate day school. And so we're really excited about this. This is actually a 6-week program that will be located at the RDLC. The hours are a little bit longer. Again, it's Monday through Thursday. And this is because a lot of our students, as you know, that either were in out-of-district programs or maybe would have traditionally been in out-of-district programs, those summer programs are typically longer. And so we developed this in order to provide that same experience within the district. And then we have a social connections program. This is a great program. It's actually been in existence for a bit. It's a 5-week program at Southwest Middle School, and it's for students who need social communication assistance, helps them learn to engage and interact, work in groups with their peers. They take field trips all over the city, learn to self-advocate, and it's actually a really, really nice program. So we're excited to bring that one back. And then for English language learners, we have our 2 programs that we've had for a while. We have Camp Can Do, which is at Clifford Marshall. It's a 4-week program, and it's for students entering grades 1 and 5 who are at the emerging and developing level of English language proficiency. And then the middle school program is for students in grades 6 to 9, and it is a 4-week program at Central Middle School. And it focuses on English language proficiency, specifically in speaking and writing. And they also do some really fun stuff. They work on science and civics. They learn about Quincy history. And again, they also travel all over the city and do some really cool things. And so we also have within all of our programs opportunities for social, emotional, and wellness support. So our programs include opportunities for mindfulness activities. We use the social thinking curriculum. And so, we incorporate that within there. We have opportunity for credit recovery through Edgenuity, which is used to be Excelis and now is Edgenuity. It's our online credit recovery program. So for students who can handle that, we prefer for students to come in because we think it's more effective. But for students that can handle it, we do have that off as well. And then we also continue to use open parachute lessons throughout the summer. And we have lots of site-based and field trip activities. So we have field days. We're really thrilled. I think last year we really started to be able to do more field trips, maybe a little bit the year before. And last year we pretty much got back to like where we had been. So that was really exciting. We have summer crafts. We have people that come in like Drums Alive and Rainforest Reptiles comes to Bridge and a couple of other places. And then we take community-based field trips and we have guest speakers and presenters. This we mentioned, I think, at the Special Education Subcommittee, but we are so excited. And, thank you, Mrs. Lebo and Ms. Hubley, for helping us get this into the district, and of course Mayor Koch, the I Can Bike program that will be in Quincy. So for people that don't know, this is a program that works with students with disabilities to teach them how to ride bikes. So this will be offered the week of August 18th. It's for students with disabilities that are ages 8 and up. It is a 5-day program, and the sessions are 75 minutes for each session. So once you sign up for one session, you do have to be there every single day at that time for 75 minutes. So it is a commitment, and we do ask that if people are interested and want to sign their children up, that they make that commitment, because there will be a waiting list, and we would really hate for someone to lose a spot if a student can't be there all 5 days. And it builds confidence and joy. It has a really huge success rate. I think it has like a 95% success rate that the students at the end of the camp will be riding bikes.
How many kids can?
I think there's about 40. We can take 8 per session, so 40 students. And so the registration has not gone live yet. This is its own registration. So the QR code is right here. I believe the registration goes live on May 12th. And you do have to sign up through the I Can Bike website. So it will not be we can potentially maybe add a link on the website or something for students who or families who are interested, but it won't be in the other registration packet. It is its own separate registration. I'll turn it back over to Mike.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Perkins. So once again, we'll have our free summer lunch program. Thank you to Sarah Dufour and her team in food services. So one item I want to point out, so everything is the same as last year with the exception of we will not be having the lunch at Lincoln. It has been moved to Southwest, and that's simply for those kitchen renovations that are occurring over the summer. So it's at Southwest Middle School, all the same time window, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. at Parker, Southwest, Ward 2 Community Center, Snug Harbor, and Montclair. And just wanted to, in addition to this robust programming we have for our students, there's still quite a few educators working behind the scenes over the summer as well. So we just wanted to highlight a couple of those. We will continue with our ongoing initiative over the summer of curriculum mapping. So we're just looking to get more courses mapped with some consistency between the two high schools. The priority subjects are listed there: world language, social studies, math, science, and ELA. So that is the focus. At the middle school level, we're going to have teachers working on the new curriculum Amplified Desmos. So the idea of planning what that rollout will look like for the next few years. But Desmos is a great curriculum with lots of potential that we actually use at the high school level already. So we're very excited about that, but we do have to put in some time this summer to get ourselves ready and prepared. Same sentiment with science. So we had a bunch of teachers this year pilot many of the units. So now the focus this summer is looking to see where those units, if those units fit within our pacing guide. So we're going to take some time this summer to see where those units can fit within our pacing guides. And I should just add, Gizmos has turned out to be a great, great tool. I've heard every teacher I've talked to raves about that, and a lot of students that I talk to really love that platform. That gives students the opportunity to access digital simulations. And so the thing with Gizmos is it's a great curriculum supplement. So we want to be very targeted in when and where we use that throughout the year, because it can help from an instructional timing standpoint. It can save teachers a lot of time so they can go deeper in other areas. So it's a very efficient tool. Not only is it extremely engaging, so we want to be very strategic in how we roll out OpenSciEd and Gizmos together. And then at the elementary level, I'll just kind of quickly go through these. We have another ST Math rollout preparation and planning period. That's for Atherton Howe, who is the new recipient of the 1.8 grant. So all those other schools will continue on. However, we're adding in Atherton Howe to that. We will have a Foundations of Math course offered. That is led by both Miss Quinn and math interventionists. We have Orton Gillingham summer coursework, the DESE Literacy Launch Institutes, and Soaring to Summer School Success, which is a science of reading PD that teachers are able to participate in. Gives them a lot of great resources that they can then bring with them for upcoming school years. So a lot going on in addition to all this programming for the students. We have a lot of educators hard at work over the summer getting ready for the 25-26 school year. So when we look at what's next, just regarding summer programming, so outreach to students and families, that's already begun in terms of the invite-only program. So those invitations have been sent out. If there's a particular parent or guardian that's thinking they should have received one and they haven't, I would encourage them to contact their principal and just check in on that. If they don't know the answer, they'll certainly connect them to the director that would. The registration is now open for all programs, so people can register for programs. The brochure went live yesterday on the webpage. Principals reached out to families and communities. They'll also include that link in their newsletters throughout the next few weeks while the registration period is open, which we're leaving tentatively until May 31st. So we'll monitor numbers. If we hit capacity, we'll have to evaluate whether or not we can expand capacity or close it down, but we really need to kind of tighten everything up by the end of May to be able to move forward. And of course, so one thing I do want to add, it's not on here, but I'll actually just go to the next slide. If people need to see that brochure, we do have the QR code right there, but it's pretty simple to get to. So www.quincypublicschools.com/Summer Scene 2025. So it's very simple. We try to keep it as accessible as possible. And the brochure is right there, so they can either view it embedded on the website, or they can download their own copy. It's totally their preference, whatever is easier, or they can scan that QR code. So hopefully more people are aware and they can sign up for the programs of their choice. But with that, I thank all of you for your support. And of course, as Dr. Perkins mentioned, thank you to Mayor Koch. There's so many districts out there that are making drastic changes to programming over the summer and to programming throughout. We're lucky that we get to offer the same robust program that we have over the years. So thank you to all of you for your support.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you for the time putting into developing the programs. It's so important for families to have these fun, high-quality, free programs to keep their kids engaged and learning over the summer. So thank you for making that a priority again. And thank you to all the educators that are taking the time to deliver the courses, the programs to the kids. I just had a couple questions. The Summer Boost program, for the middle school program, the Summer Boost.
Yeah.
I noticed the other middle school programs listed the grades. What are the grades for the Summer Boost? Is it
Entering 6th through 8.
6th to 8th? Okay. I'm just, again, just to be
Yeah.
really clear, because that did go home with Point Webster kiddos, and, 5th grade Point Webster kiddos think that they're middle schoolers, right? So just to be really clear on that, just what grades we're talking about. So
Sure.
if we could maybe add that in either this year or next year, if it's too late for this year, just kind of remembering that.
So it should be in the brochure. I'll double check that and look into
Okay.
that. If there's anything that's out there that doesn't specify, we can
Okay.
update.
That would be
Absolutely.
great. Thank you. And just, again, my 2 cents on the Theater Arts Academy, it's such an incredible program. And the other benefit is that it's later, so kids can sleep in. If you have, younger teenagers that are sleeping
Yeah.
till 11, it's an option for them. And they do a great job. Mr. Doucette and the team there are fantastic. The YouthWorks program, what age is that? Is there a minimum age on that?
So that's our current 8th grade students.
The Summer YouthWorks.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Let me just, I was thinking Ladders to
Nope.
Success.
I think, it was 9 through 12, so they think they have to be 14, right? Yeah. 14.
Okay, so 14. I think the link that I saw on the online, or the piece of paper or the online one, something like that, I think it said 15 on there. So I just want to, I don't know if it says that on the link, but just maybe take a
Double
quick
check it.
double check on that one.
Absolutely.
Because a lot of freshmen are still in the 14
Yeah.
Yeah.
group there, so that'd be great. And then field trips, do they cost any money during the programs? You said a lot of them have field trips. None of them have a cost associated?
Nope.
That's great.
Yep.
Love the expansion of the special ed offerings. And last question, the summer lunch program, I noticed on here it says that the kids need to eat at the site.
Yes.
Is that new this year, or has that always been that way?
No, it's
That's
always
kinda
been
like
that way.
Okay, all right, thank you so much, appreciate it.
I just want to make sure I
sorry.
pronounce your name correctly. Miradula? Okay, go ahead. I think it's on. It's on here. Is there a button there? They are both on, so,
There you go.
there you
There
go. Yep.
It's like magic whenever you want. So thank you so much for the presentation. I didn't know a lot of these existed, so I actually learned a lot as usual. I just have two really quick questions.
Sure.
For the high school programming, the summer pathways to success, like the course recovery one, I'm not sure if you mentioned this, but you said it's a walk-in registration. So is there like a limit, or is it like first come, first serve?
So there's not really a limit. It's credit recovery. So if students are interested and they need that, like they failed a class or whatever, we work it out. So, you know, we are so fortunate. We have such wonderful teachers that run that program, and Mr. Lane is the one that kind of organizes it. He's in charge of it, and they do a great job. So if a student has a course that they want to recover, we'll get them in.
Okay, that's great to hear. Also, in the midst of all these like amazing programs, is there a way, and there probably is, just I didn't do elementary in Quincy, so I'm not aware. Is there a way that all the parents get all these information? 'Cause-
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. So it's online. The principals send it home to the parents. Yep. So yeah, we do a huge blast.
Yeah. I guess I didn't see it because I'm in high school, so I
Yeah,
didn't see the
yeah.
elementary programs, but that makes sense.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, great question.
You all set?
Good.
All right, thank you,
Great.
thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay. Next on our list, we have the updated QPS, don't move,
No, I'm just
QPS Bullying Prevention Plan, Dr. Perkins and Ms. Papil.
Okay. All right. Thank you again for having me and Dr. Perkins again, and Mrs. Papil. It's that time. You know, the last time we updated this was 2 years ago. The regulations actually specify that you have to update it every 2 years, and so that's why we're here. And I think we did maybe a few meetings ago let you know that this was in the works, that we were working on, you know, updating it. So not much has changed. Go to the next slide.
Oh, sorry.
So not much has changed in terms of the policies and the procedures and the regulations. So just for people that aren't aware, the bullying policy came into effect in 2010 in an act relevant to bullying in schools. It was updated again in 2014. And as part of the law, all districts are required to have a bullying intervention and prevention plan. So just to quickly review what is supposed to go in the plan, there needs to be definitions about what bullying is, what cyberbullying is, and what retaliation is. We have to have procedures for reporting and investigating and also collecting data on bullying. We do need to identify a range of disciplinary actions. We have to have procedures to help with safety and restore safety to the victims. And we need to have procedures for notifying parents or guardians of the victim or the perpetrator, and also letting them know if there's going to be criminal charges. And then a provision for professional development for the staff, and a provision to inform parents and guardians about the bullying prevention curriculum. And finally, The plan must be developed in consultation with stakeholders, which Mrs. Papil will talk about how we did that for this update. There must be a public comment period, which we just had recently, and that it needs to be available on the website, which we're very fortunate. We have really a nice bullying intervention and prevention plan that Kelly Powers had started and now will be updated with Katie Delaney. And it's supposed to be updated biannually, and the procedures for investigating reports of bullying and retaliation need to be consistent with the school or district policies and procedures for investigations, which they are. And with that, I will turn it over to Mrs. Papil, who will talk about the things that we did.
So good evening, everybody. Thank you for having us. I thought it was really important, and Dr. Perkins thought it was really important, that we actually had the sites do the presentation in partnership with their PTOs. It's one thing to get a message at the district level, but families and students are really just connected to their sites. And they want to know what's going to happen, you know, if there's an incident or if they have a concern. So it was great that all the principals did that with their PTOs. They covered the definitions, the fact that there's a prohibition against bullying, bullying versus conflict, how they're going to communicate with parents, what they can expect in terms of discipline, protected categories for students, just the bullying and prevention intervention plan. It's a big document for someone to kind of read through, so it was good that they could kind of summarize that and what it looks like in action in their buildings. Just having that shared understanding, like how are we going to handle this together? Like what can you expect from us if you have a concern, and how we're going to try to help everybody involved. You know, it's important to know that sometimes there'll be social learning kinds of interventions that might happen. Maybe it isn't a bullying incident, but we're still going to address the issue and help kids navigate conflict when it's conflict. So those things are really important, and the fact that they get to ask their own administrators questions and give them input right there and then. So that was one way we got some feedback about the plan and how things are going to work. As Dr. Perkins mentioned, we do, you know, have on the website, we had a commentary period. Thank you, Laura Owens, for always posting things in the community notices so that people knew how to provide feedback, where they could see the implementation plan. And then we also did a questionnaire survey, and that was posted from March 21st to April 3rd. The commentary period was longer, so that was February 12th to April 3rd. So we got 61 responses from the survey. We did kind of summarize the themes that were in this is like an open-ended question to get feedback besides the other questions that we had. And people really wanted a clearer communication about the district's policy and the school response. So I feel like we did a good thing when we did bring it back to the sites for that, because again, they had more personalized experience in kind of getting those answers. But I think there's always more we can do so that people understand what the policy looks like. People wanted it translated and just more accessible to everybody, and you know, we're taking that in and we're going to see how we're going to do that. That's a very manageable thing to do. People feel like the punishments were too lenient, you know, when there's a bullying incident. That's their, you know, their experience. They felt like, and I think that's a little tricky because we can't always say what the consequences are, but you know, it does make us think that we're not sharing maybe enough, that we take everything seriously, you know, because we can't share the consequence. That's hard, but I think we have to work harder at making sure people know, hey, we understand your child was impacted, we care about this, this is how we're going to create safety, this is how we're going to address maybe the student that crossed that boundary and made that mistake and help them move forward in a more positive way. So we got to be more creative in trying to get that across. And then more bullying prevention programs. And I think also, too, you know, we have a lot of programming. It's built into the Open Parachute platform and things like that. It's built into Steps to Respect. It's, you know, it's pro-social skills. That's prevention as well as very specific, what is bullying versus conflict. You know, how do you make the report? Like those things definitely are prevention too. In understanding like how to be an upstander versus a bystander. You know, those are very specific things on bullying. So when people see the pro-social stuff, they might not necessarily think that's bullying prevention, but it is. When kids have good social skills, they're less likely to become a target. Not that I don't mean to blame targets, but, you know, more so that they can, you know, kind of stand up for themselves, feel empowered in that way. And they're less likely to cross those boundaries that we don't want them to cross when they have good social skills. So I think those were all really good suggestions and good for us to know. We did make some additions to the implementation plan. There were 3 major initiatives that we did. So we did the youth risk behavior survey, and within that, we looked at how kids felt in terms of safety to and from school, how much teasing and name calling, online cyberbullying, dating violence. So we looked at a lot of things. We crafted those questions because we wanted to elicit like, hey, you know, what's the scope and of this problem within our school system? At the high school level, what does that look like? Do kids feel safe? So that was really valuable information for us. We also worked really hard with, I should say that the health educators worked really hard with Dr. Haley, who is the creator of Open Parachute. She loves our district and we love her so much, but she really wanted to know the impact of her programming for us over the last several years. So she did an extensive study using pre and post surveys for learning, so that we're making sure that kids understand the concepts and they're able to kind of utilize strategies. But she also looked at other data points like discipline, referrals, attendance, achievement, and things like that. So we're waiting for those results. She's analyzing that information. So that was free to us. And I think it's really great information for us to see, like, you know, we're investing a lot into that Open Parachute program. Let's see the impact that it's having. So I'm really happy about that. Also, the Sandy Hook Promise Program, I thought that was a huge implementation. I gotta say, the principals, the counselors, the teachers, the health interventionists, and the health educators, they dived right in. Those were school-wide initiatives, grades 6 through 12. They have Promise Clubs at each site. And that is really, really valuable, interventions to make sure kids aren't feeling isolated, that kids are connecting with each other in a more positive way, and school-led, student-led initiatives. So I'm excited about that, and that will continue for next year. But that's all part of our prevention and intervention programming. So we do have like a website, obviously, the Quincy Public Schools website, a page dedicated to bullying prevention and intervention, and you can find resources there, and they're listed on that slide. And we appreciate that so much because there are links for resources. So MARC resources, DESE resources, NetSmarts, like things that are coming, becoming challenging for parents, especially the online stuff. So we also have the anonymous reporting, and I got a report over the weekend. A student made a bullying report anonymously, but we were still able to address the issue because of the information that was provided. So we were able to do an intervention. I still don't know who the student was that made the report, but I think that's okay because we were able to intervene still. So it is valuable that students and caretakers are making those reports. So I appreciate that too. So that kind of does it for our updates. I know there's not a ton of changes, but it's regulation. So we can't really kind of mess around with the language, but we're trying to build upon and have the resources that are meaningful for students and families and teachers and administrators. And that is it.
Mrs. Hughley.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the presentation. I realize you can't really do too much, but I appreciate the update. I do want to say that where it says the punishments are too lenient for the bullies, I do hear that frequently
Yeah.
from parents. And I think a lot of that comes down to their child is going back to school, and then they see the person there that hurt their child. And the
Right.
child comes home and tells their parents that they saw them at school, and it doesn't reflect anything to them that anything happened.
Right.
And that child is now seeing that bully at school also and thinking, well, nothing happened.
Right.
And so it is sort of a mental impact on the student that was bullied like twice, because they're getting the bullying incident, then they're also getting the after the fact of coming home and telling their parents that they saw them and not feeling like anything
Right.
happened. So I agree, if there was something more that could be in
Yeah.
that, I think that's what parents are searching for, just something to be able to say to their child. Maybe, I know they can't say everything because you can't disclose everything, but something. And I feel like that's where there's a loss, that the parents can't really explain to their children what's going on.
Right.
And that's hard for a parent to see your child hurt and
Right.
not be able to fix it.
Right.
Or to
Right.
have any kind of a fix. And that as a parent I can see that being difficult.
Right. And I just do want to reiterate that the principals are really good, about making sure that they're addressing those issues and creating safety plans and talking to classroom teachers, and the counselors are checking in with kids and monitoring. And, there's no easy fixes to these situations, but it is ongoing, and they do take it seriously. No principal wants their students to feel unsafe in their buildings. They take that very personally, because they want to make sure that kids are happy and healthy in their school building, and that they can go to them. The principals, they are like adjustment counselors themselves, because they do so much and they care so much about their kids and their families. So but I do understand, people are scared to death that, their child's being hurt, and they want them to be safe. And, it is hard, but we want to work with people and families just to make sure that we're doing everything we need to do, and that they can be reassured that we're going to keep them safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mrs. Lebo?
To that point, I think it's also important to let the parents of the target know that the perpetrator also has some needs.
Right.
Because, they have a problem. If they're doing that to other kids, they have a problem also. And so I think if they could express that a little bit more, that, you don't have to talk about what it is, but that, we support your student first, but we're trying to support this student to have better behavior and not to be doing it. So I think it would be nice to have some sort of discussion around it, because people do feel that way, that
Yeah.
their kid is just thrown back into the masses.
Yeah.
I'm so happy about the open parachute thing, that she's doing that. I think that is, because we have put a lot into open parachute. And I think it's going to show stuff, but I think it's so great to have that data, so that's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to seeing it.
Okay.
Thank you very much. It was a great presentation.
Thank you.
Mrs. Guttrow? Mayor Koch today.
Thank you. Excellent presentation. I love hearing about this stuff. How many incidents annually do we have reported, and what's the breakdown at elementary, middle, high?
So I did pull those numbers today, but I have to caution you, I get end of the year reports, so sometimes people give me the reports at the end of the year, and I really compile everything at the end of the year, but like for a snapshot, right now, what I have, there's about 13 reports at the high school level, 30 reports at middle school level, which is typical, which we know that, this stuff really does peak at middle school, and 11 reports at the elementary level.
And what's the breakdown between in-person and cyber?
Oh, I didn't do a
mean,
deep
what's your-
dive into
what's your-
that.
what's
I
your
would
s-
say most of it's online, starts online.
Most of it's
and
online, yeah.
ends up
Or it
in school.
involves it.
Yeah.
It might not, it's not necessarily, oh, this is only at school or this is only
Yeah.
online. It's both.
Yeah, probably 100%, to
And
be honest.
then, can you just speak a little bit about the bullying curriculum at different levels and how that may impact the numbers of incidents?
So I think, the report from Open Parachute's really going to help us with that, to see if there's any kind of correlation. But, we have long.
You want there to be a correlation.
Yeah.
You want the training and the teaching.
Yes.
And the curriculum to drop the number of instances.
Yeah.
So when will you get the results of that?
Probably shortly.
Share that with us. That would be great.
Sure, yeah. I think that would be more scientific than what I'm going to tell you.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Anecdotal. So thank you. I don't have anything more. Appreciate it.
Ms. Pardios.
Thank you. And I so appreciate that the schools did the presentations this year. I think that was really, really helpful, being on two PTOs. I heard it at Quincy
good.
High and I heard it at Point Webster, which is great, actually.
Yeah.
I wanted to just let you know, and what you kind of have here as to just comments from everyone here, the community comments sort of mirrored what I was going to mention, sort of came out of those meetings. A lot of it was just an increased awareness that not everything that parents thought was bullying is bullying by definition. So just kind of making sure that that definition, that clarity is sort of
Yeah.
continue that communication on what that is. And even though it may not be bullying by definition, we're still taking that seriously. I think that sort of came out of both of them, was the surprise that some issues weren't considered bullying that they, you would just think would be, right? But I think that, so that just a little bit better clarity on the definition of it. But again, that we take all of them seriously. And that what sort of came out of both and other anecdotal from parents from other schools is that even though we have a plan and we have supports and we have, two of the most empathetic people I know right here before us, and I know that you're there for families, we still do have bullying, we still do
Yeah.
have these issues. So
do.
just the acknowledgement that we still have work to do, even though we do have a good plan and we do, support families, it is still happening. So
Yeah.
we do have to kind of keep this being a priority. And just, I think we need, what came out of both meetings, and it was sort of something that Mrs. Hubley alluded to, is better communication that we can't share what happens to the perpetrator, because it's just same thing, like nothing happens to them. Well, of course something happens to them, but they're minors too, and you can't. So I think we have to just keep kind of pushing that. We are doing that, but everything's protected. So you may not see it, but everyone has a ramification from this, a consequence. So just sort of being generic about it, but kind of keep pushing that out, that even though you're still going to see that person in school because they have a right to be in school, but we're taking care of it, we're supporting their needs, like Mrs. Lebo was saying, we're helping both parties. But we don't want you to feel that it was, in futility that you made that bullying claim because something happened from it. So just, again, that continued sort of, because everyone wants to know who did it, what happened to them. And I think in just social media, just the way the world is, everyone kind of wants to know that, right? What happened to
yeah.
that person? And, we're not always entitled to that information, so,
Right.
especially in this situation. And then the last thing I wanted to say is, so in the presentations, having it delivered at the school, the info was citywide. If I remember correctly, it was a lot of the instances, the numbers were citywide, or I don't know if it was broken down by group, by middle school, high school, if it was just all together in one big lump, I kind of forget.
I
But it was-
usually break it down by level.
Okay, so
usually.
I think that if we're going to have the schools do it, it might be better to have the actual school data, because a lot of times it's like, well, we don't know if it's our school that's driving this. Is this really a problem here, or is it? So I think a lot of that conversation came up at both PTOs that I was hearing it at is, well, is it our school or is it another school? And if it's going to be school-based delivery like that, it might be good for at least the principal to have that information so they can sort of answer some of those questions, if
Yeah.
that's helpful.
Yeah, even if they could describe themes of what they're seeing at their own
Right.
site is
Right,
really
exactly.
helpful.
Like, we may not be seeing as much of this category, but we're
Right. Mm-hmm.
seeing a little more of this category. So just something to sort of bring it home to that particular, so it's not principals sort of opining on the whole level,
Mm-hmm.
district-wide, where they may not feel as comfortable discussing that portion if it's not happening there.
Mm-hmm.
But this is great. It was a great opportunity, I think, for parents to really engage with the
good.
material
Yeah.
in their PTOs instead of just sitting on a Zoom call and just sort of listening. So thank you for doing that. And also looking forward to the open parachute responses. That's great. Thank
Sure.
you.
Thanks.
Amy?
Hi.
Hi, I have a couple questions. So, at the high school level, when students are involved in bullying that results in criminal
investigations and active like court cases, what are we doing at the school level to, one, ensure that those students who might share a class with those students are feeling safe, and two, to make sure that like what we're adding on in addition to what they serve as court is fair, I guess.
So like court proceedings and things like that, that's separate from what happens. We still have an obligation to educate, but sometimes it becomes so unsafe, and if it rises to a certain level, then we would look to, maybe that other student might have to do a different program or be in a different place, or, so, it really kind of depends on the seriousness. Thankfully, we don't have a lot of bullying situations that end up, at court, thankfully. But we do create safety plans. We create space in a building if that's going to provide enough safety. But we really have to be sure if there's criminal charges that people are safe together. But we always have to educate kids, no matter, what the circumstances are. So it just kind of depends.
Yeah, I guess my question is like, they might not necessarily be charged, but they were at the scene, and will you bring a charge? Will you act against them, or will you not?
So there's school consequences, and then there's like criminal charges. So they're kind of two different things.
Yeah,
don't know if you wanna-
I think, Amy, I don't know if I'm answering what you're asking, but I think so. So, if, say a student, something happens outside of school and people are involved, is maybe what you're asking, right? And then there might be criminal charges. Maybe some students are involved in criminal charges and some students aren't. But we only have like so much jurisdiction over what happens outside of school. If it impacts the school day, and it, like you said, it starts to impact other kids feeling safe in the building, then yes, we would intervene. That doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to press charges against them, because we try not to do that. We don't want high school kids to end up with criminal charges. That's the last thing we want. But we will intervene. Like Mrs. Papil said, we will do safety plans. We might move students' classes. We might like rearrange their schedule. We do that kind of stuff. In some cases, extreme cases, we may even move schools. So we do it. And again, as Mrs. Papil said, it really depends on the seriousness of what's happening and how many kids are involved. And but we will, if it's potentially going to impact the school day, and sometimes we suspend. It really does depend. But if it's going to impact the school day and it's going to cause a safety issue for other kids in the building, we absolutely will intervene.
I guess my question was, that was a really good answer. I guess obviously you don't have jurisdiction of what happens outside the school day, but obviously that will impact what students are feeling, but they might not necessarily voice it, but they're seeing this kid at school, and they know they're sort of involved in this. And I guess if it's not QPS, and it's not like the victim is not QPS, and it's outside of school hours, and obviously we're doing something to make the students feel safe that are directly affected and directly interacting with these people, but are we doing something as a school to, rather than sweep this under the rug, we acknowledge the issue that's happening?
I think we try to do that when we know about it. And again, our key is it impacting the school day? So when something happens on a weekend or after school, unless it's like right on the way home from school or right on the way to school, our key is how much is that trickling over? If it's impacting the education and the school environment, then we have to intervene. So that's kind of the threshold, which I think most people maybe don't necessarily understand. I think a lot of people think when things happen on the weekends, that the school district somehow owns that, and sometimes we do, but only if it's impacting the school day, and we're talking about if that student doesn't have like charges. If the student has charges, then we're definitely, intervening. But if it impacts the school day, then we are intervening. And I think when we know about it, we do try. Sometimes, again, it's not always like we talked about today. It's not always something that everybody sees, but we try to work with those students and those families to make sure that those people feel comfortable.
Yeah. Thank you.
Maridula?
Thank you again for the
Yeah, no problem.
presentation. So you mentioned that a student gave an anonymous report.
Mhm.
Is there a way for parents to make anonymous reports, not students? Because I feel like sometimes it's a huge responsibility to put that in student's hand and they might not use it properly, but parents would obviously have more authority over what's going on. And I don't mean parents of the student being targeted, because it might be no, if they're younger, they will tell their parents, but I think when they're older, they become less dependent on telling their parents if they're bullied and more on their like friends. So is there a way a friend can tell their parent about their friend being bullied, and the parent can make an anonymous report without exposing the person being bullied and like impacting their school life, but also making sure there are consequences for the person being bullied?
Yes, so the reporting form is for caretakers, for parents, and for students. It's for anybody that wants to make the report.
Does it go directly to the principals or?
Goes to me, and then I try to figure out where it's happening. So sometimes people put the information in or not. Sometimes, like in this case, the student gave me an email address. So I emailed the student directly, and I encouraged that student to tell a trusted adult what's happening, that we would do the best we can to address it, given the information, but please go see your counselor and your principal. We want to help you. They didn't do that, but there was enough information that, we were able to address the issue. And it was something that was happening online, but still, it was significant enough that the student felt uncomfortable when they came to school. So we're trying to make sure that kids, it's really hard to separate the online stuff and then how kids feel when they come to school, because like stuff can be shared, and so like lots of kids might be involved and know about it or whatever. So we really do our best to address things the best we can so that school is safe and healthy.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think in the high school level, deans are especially connected to their grade level.
Mhm.
So if there's the form goes to you guys, but if there's a way for it to go to principals or if they're in high school to their direct deans, I think it might be really helpful in terms of like immediate action. But I totally understand where you're
Yeah.
coming from.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what happened. So I get it. I was able to figure out which school. I shared it with the principal. Principal's like, I'm on it. Addressed it that day, communicated back to me, because you're right. The people in the buildings are the people that are supporting kids. I'm kind of up here. So, yeah, it's a good point. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we're all set. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next. Quincy Public Schools FY 2025 budget transfer. Mr. Mulaney.
Usually, we make a transfer at the end of the year, and we'll be coming with you for that again. But as you recall, at the budget meeting that we had, we said we were about a $1.6 million surplus on the salary side and a net $1.6 million deficit for expenses. So we're running low on funds to be able to pay special ed transportation and tuitions. So we're taking this step to ask for a transfer of funds to address the shortfall currently. So we'd like to transfer into special education tuitions, $1 million, special education transportation, $1 million. And the monies would come from salaries, the $1.6 million surplus that we had mentioned before, and $400,000 from natural gas. Fortunately, we had a very warm heating system, except for a brief blast in February. So I think this would be the smartest thing to do, just to make sure we don't run a situation where we're not paying our bills.
Make a motion to make transfer. We had a great presentation from Mr. Mulaney at the meeting, and so I feel very comfortable with this, so I make a motion to.
Second.
Second by Mrs. Hubley. And on the motion,
Mr. Mulaney, would you just be able to refresh my memory? The 1.6 million for the salaries, is that all educator salaries, or what salaries were those again?
The
coming from?
majority was educators, but there was about 500,000 from bus drivers, and there was a deficit in aides because we have a significant increase in aides based on the needs of our special ed population. So it's a net $1.6 million overall. The majority of it is from educators.
Okay, I'm still a little uncomfortable that if we had that in educators, that we keep that in educators. I think there's always more need for more teachers in the REACH program and, you know, the band program, all of those programs. So I'm still a little uncomfortable kind of just wholesale moving that over. I understand at this point, this is this budget and we're kind of here now. So I'm going to vote to approve this, but it does make me a little bit uncomfortable to sort of move salaries over instead of trying to find other, if we foresee a $1.6 million, you know, surplus in educators, I'd love to be able to see that sooner so we could actually bring on more educators in the tail part of the year, if we needed that. So I know there's, we had all the principals before us and said, could you do with more specialists or more this? And everyone said, well, of course we could do with more of that. So this is an opportunity that I don't want to let kind of keep going. So if you're noticing that, I'd love to get a heads up a little sooner in the year that that's going to happen next year. So thank you.
Mrs. Lebo?
I just want to say that if we didn't do this, we would be in arrears on some of these bills. And we have to do that. We have to balance our budget. And if,
Right.
and I think Mr. Mulaney does a great job with that. But we couldn't have kept that money in there and hired more people, because then we would be, I mean, these people are causing, the transportation cost goes up because we don't have enough bus drivers. So it's sort of a balance, I think.
And if I remember correctly from the budget meeting, you did say that a lot of this was from move-ins, that we wouldn't have been able to
Correct.
actually have at the beginning of the year. This
Right.
was caused by people moving into our,
Moving into the positions, and then it was a lot of breakage, mid-year breakage from staff.
exactly. So we wouldn't have seen this at the beginning of the year to do what Mrs. Perdios is suggesting. Thank you.
Okay, we all
Move the
set?
question.
Roll call?
Mr. Begoli?
Yes.
Mrs. Cahill?
Yes.
Mr. Guttrow?
Yes.
Mrs. Hubley?
Yes.
Mrs. Lebo?
Yes.
Mrs. Perdios?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Next on the agenda, we have new Squantum Elementary School rooftop solar PV authorization. Mrs. Hubley, Mrs. Hubley.
Thank you. Before you, you have a memorandum that was sent to the superintendent from Paul Hines, Commissioner, Department of Public Works, who is requesting that we have a consideration for a vote tonight that states, under the provisions of Chapter 30B, as well as any other applicable statute or regulation, the rooftop of the new Squantum Elementary School be deemed available for lease or license for the development, installation, and operation for a renewable energy facility for the period of 25 years from the start of the energy generation. If we could have that for roll call vote for tonight.
Do we have
Mrs.
a,
Mulvey?
we have a motion?
Thank you.
Mrs. Lebo?
Second?
Mrs. Hubley? On the motion?
Does this mean the solar panels? Okay, thank you.
Mr. Guttrow?
Yeah, through you to the superintendent. Does this mean that to reduce our energy costs?
Correct.
I mean, just the way that it's worded, deemed available for lease or license for the development, it doesn't say the use of the QPS.
I know, I understand, but unfortunately, this is how,
the language
this is
of
the
law.
language of the law.
Okay, but it's for us.
Yep, and it's also to help us get to the net zero that we need
Understood.
for.
Got it.
You all set? Okay. All right. We had the first and the motion. And roll call, please.
Mr. Begoli? Yes. Mrs. Cahill?
Yes.
Mr. Guttrow?
Yes.
Mrs. Hubley?
Yes.
Mrs. Lebo?
Yes.
Mrs. Perdios? Yes. Thank you.
Okay, next, South Shore Educational Collaborative Board representative, I believe, is the superintendent.
So every year, the law requires that this board appoint a representative for the South Shore Educational Collaborative. Typically, it is the superintendent in each district that belongs to the collaborative. Obviously, Quincy is a member of that collaborative. I've served in that role since 2020, and I would just ask that you make a motion that I continue to serve in that position, and does require a roll call vote.
Motion, second by Ms. Hubley. Roll call, please.
Mr. Begoli? Mrs. Cahill?
Yes.
Mr. Guttrow?
Yes.
Mrs. Hubley?
Yes.
Mrs. Lebo?
Yes.
Mrs. Perdios? Mayor Koch. Thank you.
Review of school committee policy book sections. Mrs. Lebo?
Yes, so we had an incredible presentation from Bridget Vaughn and one of our middle school teachers on how we select books, and really a great presentation. But we did notice that our policy has not been updated in a long time, so we're going to revisit our policy and make sure it at least matches what's going wrong at the MASC. So I'm just going to refer that to teaching and learning for that. And then next item, same thing. We're going to refer that to teaching and learning, so we can take a look at those policies and see which of those need to be updated.
Great, thank you. Next on the agenda, oh, I'm sorry.
For that item H, for the programs for the gifted students, I'd love for that to be a meeting of the whole. When we have that particular meeting, I'd love to be able to hear that and be part of that conversation, if that's okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Cahill. Next on the agenda, we have the consent agenda, which is for a roll call vote. Can I,
Motion to approve?
Second.
Mrs. Lebo, Mrs. Hubley, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Begoli? Mrs. Cahill?
Yes.
Mr. Guttrow?
Yes.
Mrs. Hubley? Mrs. Lebo?
Yes.
Mrs. Perdios?
Yes.
Mayor Koch.
Okay, all set. Additional business, there's none. Communications, upcoming school committee meetings at 6:30 PM, regular meetings on May 21st, June 11th, and subcommittee meetings, we have May 21st, which is a tentative policy, May 28th, which is budget and finance, teaching and learning, June 4th, which is QPS budget hearing, facilities, security, and transportation. Reports of subcommittees, quarterly budget and finance, Mayor Koch isn't able to do that.
He'll report at the next
He'll
meeting.
report at the next meeting. Special education, Mrs. Perdios?
Thank you. On April 30th, last Wednesday, we had a special education subcommittee meeting, and we had 3 items on the agenda. The first was a presentation about the pivotal response treatment in Quincy Public Schools with South Shore Autism Center Director Michelle Sullivan and Jamie Shaughnessy, and Director of Special Education Julie Graham. And the PRT is an evidence-based intervention that focuses on teaching foundational skills that make it easier for the special ed child to then learn other skills. There's a little bit more information about that in the full meeting minutes. You can read that online. The second item on the agenda was a review of the out-of-district student placements that we have in our QPS district, and that presentation was given by Special Education Director Julie Graham and Coordinator Jennifer Leary. And Ms. Leary clarified that out-of-district programs are specialized programs that are not available within the school district. We currently have 157 students in 40 different out-of-district schools. Next year, they were projecting that there will be fewer, 143. And there was some conversation about how keeping students, not sending them out for out-of-district and keeping them in district, that the RDLC is providing the district with a savings of about $90,000 to $200,000 per student per year, depending on the school that they would have been placed at. So there's some savings there. And the last item on the agenda was a Quincy Special Education Parent Advisory Council presentation, an update from President Sarah Wood, highlighting the growth. She highlighted the growth this school year and the participation among K-3 parents. She mentioned the I Can Bike program, and thank you to Ms. Hubley and Ms. Lebo again for bringing that, making that come to be. And upcoming events for the CPAC are a parent support meeting on special education law on May 27th, and June 7th is their end of the year celebration. And full meeting minutes are on the website. Thank you.
Teaching and learning, Mrs. Lebo.
Yes, as I said, on April 30th, we had a meeting, and our literacy specialist, Bridget Vaughn, was there along with a Central Middle School 8th grade reading teacher, and they explained to us how the books are chosen in all of these great resources that we have in the district, so that we can actually look at books and find out that they actually are culturally responsive or age appropriate and current. We also learned information about if a teacher wants to get a new book, there's a process in the way for them to do it. and there's all sorts of supports. They said that they like to pick books that are mirrors and windows, giving students views of the world that they may not see, so that also see themselves in the world and also see other things in the world. Mrs. Hubley wanted to make sure that there was student feedback in the textbooks that we were using, and that is done, they said, informally, but they do, because some of the books are not all that popular anymore. Mr. Regoli was very concerned that the classics are still in place, and the classics are still in place. And we talked about if a parent objected to a text, could they opt out? And there are options to do that, could be referred to the students. So it was a great meeting. I really thank them for that presentation, and that's it.
Oh, good. Okay, thank you. And let me see, I turned the page. So we are going to be going into executive session, and we will not be returning. So the meeting is adjourned.
have to do a roll
Oh,
call.
wait, sorry, roll call for, executive
Motion
session.
and a second.
Okay, motion, Mrs. Lebo, second, Mrs. Hubley, roll call.
Mr. Begoli? Mrs. Cahill?
Yes.
Mr. Guttrow? Mrs. Hubley? Mrs. Lebo? Mrs. Perdios?
Yes.
Mayor Koch. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.